world market. Countries that have a lot of debt and don't have the ability to service it are in a difficult position.
He stresses that heavily indebted countries with looming potential food insecurity are especially susceptible to exactly the kind of people power that has been seen in Sri Lanka, with much uncertainty there still ahead. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
And the main news again. In the UK, former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Foreign Secretary Liz Truss are the final two candidates in the race to replace Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The European Commission has asked member states to cut energy usage by 15% in response to fears over supply from Russia. And wildfires are continuing to rage across parts of Europe as a heatwave hits multiple countries. There's more from us on Twitter at Feature Story. That's Feature Story News. Nick Harper reporting.
This is the Onion Week in Review. Poets across the nation issued a statement Thursday announcing that shadows, inky sharp as the raven's beak, meet the clouds like dusty charcoal on an ashen brow. Citing the ageless gloom of morning and a weary sun, its astroluminescence wrapped in arid gauze, the report noted that doubt lingers in the frail minutes of a young dawn.
For what is the sound of hope? For what is life's moment of fulfillment? The supple lie of spring prolongs the inquisition. Father! Father! Do you not sense the dread of autumn's looming song danced in trembling half-step? 1, 2, 1, 2.
The poets later added, womb, womb, womb. And in local news, a sad sack is bullied by an area goose. In other news, a photographer specializes in those pictures where lights going by really fast look like lines. An entree is apparently the kind you squeeze lime over, and employees finally get that break room bathtub they wanted.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. As always, you're invited to join the discussion. 603-283-6160 if you would like to weigh in. Again, the number 603-283-6160. With you in the studio tonight, it's Aria.
It's Bonnie.
And Matt.
And Matt, today was a hearing for Jeremy Kauffman, the founder of and creator of LBRY, which is a blockchain-based media sharing protocol.
Well said.
Thank you.
That's what it is.
Why is he? Last time I heard, the SEC was messing with him.
Yes.
I don't know if that ever got resolved or what happened with it.
No, they've been messing with him apparently for years, but he kind of kept it under his hat for legal reasons. Lawyers make recommendations and so forth. And I don't know, maybe a year ago, he let it out that the SEC was messing with him.
When did the lawsuit start?
I don't know the details like that, but they've been trying to get him. It's not. I don't think it's necessarily Jeremy so much as it is LBRY Inc.
So what is this thing going on in the federal court? Is this related to the SEC nonsense?
Yes, this is 100%. The SEC is, making claims about LBRY. They're trying to claim that LBRY credits are a security.
Whatever that means, right?
Yeah. The SEC thinks it's apparently the SEC does have say over anything that could be considered a security. So if something's being marketed as an investment that will make you more money in the long run if you hold on to it, then it's a security.
But that was never said, as I recall, of LBC, which is the cryptocurrency that LBRY uses.
Yes.
It was just a token that is used on their blockchain.
So
I think it was their evidence, from what I gather, is very on the light side. They don't have a whole lot of it. And I think one thing they're referencing is some employee of LBRY's a long time ago sent an email to somebody saying, it's cryptocurrency, so it'll probably go up in value.
Wow.
And, that was kind of an informal, it was not a direct statement by LBRY Inc. by any stretch of the imagination. It was just some employee sending a kind of an informal note.
That's a good example of why you should always say this isn't legal advice or this isn't financial advice.
This isn't financial advice. This isn't legal advice. I personally think you should be able to say whatever you want to say and let the buyer beware, but in this case, it looks like another weak federal case against cryptocurrency people.
They've been doing that a lot lately.
Yeah, it's been it's like the new thing. It's all hip and cool in Washington, D.C. to attack people that are into crypto on a influential level. So, listening to it, one interesting commonality between this is an entirely different judge than the one that's overseeing Ian's case. But one commonality I found between this judge and Ian's judge, and I have to say I'm very impressed by, is they're old guys, and they seem to be doing everything. I think they're making a very valid effort as kind of stodgy old law people to learn everything they can learn about the subject matter. I think they're trying very hard to understand library, to understand cryptocurrency in general, just so they can have a grasp of what's going on in this case and what is the complaint. And I think they're doing a pretty good job, to be honest with you. And what I said to Jeremy earlier was that the one huge tragedy about these cases is that the subject matter experts that these judges should be reaching out to for advice on the topic
are the ones being
prosecuted.
Yeah, for sure.
And that is such a backwards tragedy. And I think you find that all throughout government operations. I think it's just one backwards tragedy after the next. And they just stack them up and insist that they're right about things in the end of the day. And
so is Jeremy being charged, or was he there representing library?
He's there representing library.
Okay, so he's not personally charged with anything?
I don't believe so.
Library presumably is being sued by the SEC or whatever?
Yeah, this is going to be like a violation fine kind of thing as far as I know. But again, listening to just like in Ian's case, you can sit back and listen to the Crypto 6 case stuff going on. It's really, really the case that the state, I shouldn't say the case that the government is bringing just feels really weak and rickety and wonky, and then nobody knows what's really going on. There's no real law in place.
Well, they're regulators, and they shouldn't even be able to make laws.
Yeah. And that's kind of what they do. And now with the Supreme Court case from the EPA from a couple of weeks ago, these government agencies aren't going to be able to just start declaring definitions like they used to anymore.
Oh, I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, it was a big case. I heard about it because the Second Amendment stuff for
a couple weeks ago.
It was a couple weeks ago.
It was recently. I'm not sure exactly how long ago.
2-3 weeks ago. It's kind of ongoing, but the hammer dropped a couple weeks ago for sure. So with that said, does that make a difference in any of this? Does that make it? I bet that makes some kind of difference. So, if these people are just going to be the ones arbitrarily coming up with definitions of what's a security or what's a rifle, what's a pistol, what's a machine gun, what's an armament.
In a lot of cases, they're using definitions from like the 70s and the 80s that don't actually apply to anything happening in the world today. Yeah. It's like trying to regulate the internet by using laws about, telephone lines or whatever.
Right. Yeah. And it doesn't make any sense. And a lot of it's, you realize what they're trying to do. They're just trying to be attack dogs and get some blood in their mouth.
They want to destroy cryptocurrency. Or they want to take control of cryptocurrency.
They want to do it by destroying people who are influential in the crypto sphere too. So if you have a voice of any kind, this show, we reach a lot of people with this show. And we have been talking about cryptocurrency on this show for way longer than I was on this show. I remember listening to this show back in New York, people, Ian talking about Bitcoin back a very long time ago. So
I think the earliest mention was like in 2012 or something like that. The earliest time it was mentioned on the show. I don't remember the exact date though.
Yeah, that would be about right. It was a long time ago.
It was.
And, when you're an early adopter and you have a big voice about it, you are the biggest threat other than the technology itself.
Sure, and they can't go after the technology in this particular case because it's decentralized.
And they can't really do anything about it. Decentralization is a really hard hill to climb for somebody who only understands centralization. I mean, it's a night and day kind of thing.
And they only understand one way to go after things. Like, they actually can't kill cryptocurrency this way, luckily.
Yeah, no. And the library case, I think this is going to be like a summary judgment kind of thing. It may not even end up going to trial. At the end of today, the judge said, nobody do anything else. Don't file any more motions. Don't spend any more money.
Really?
Yeah. He said, I'll have an answer for you, hopefully by the end of August, but definitely by the end of September. and I don't want anybody spending any more money on this.
Why the hell is it taking so long?
He said, well, I don't know. He's got a lot. It's a deep hole. This guy's got to educate himself in crypto and blockchains and all kinds of stuff before he can make a call as to whether this is even what the judge's words were. I need to find out if this is even a triable case. So he's not, even the judge is looking at this like, there's nothing clear cut. He needs to find out if it's a triable case.
I'm glad he spoke up now that library has spent $4 to $5 million.
Of course, yeah. Well, the punishment is the process is the punishment.
Right? Yeah, there's no way to win once the government comes after you. It's just a matter of how much damage they do. How expensive is it going to be? How much time are you going to lose? No one wins.
Nobody wins
when the government gets involved.
No, but sometimes when the government loses, everybody wins, and it's sad that some people martyr themselves or are forced into martyrdom.
Well, you may win some rights back, or something along those lines.
And everybody wins those rights.
The people who are actually targeted by the government, they never get that time or money back.
No, not even close. So,
the right is good, but it's like a consolation prize,
right?
Essentially,
yeah.
After the government has stolen some number of years of your life, or some amount of money from you, or some property from you, you know how governments
I think
are.
it's physical too, like the amount of stress I'm under for my boyfriend going through.
Totally.
I feel like I'm aging faster.
100%. Yeah, and you should be. I mean, that's what stress does to you, and these people are the ultimate creators of stress. That's what I like this. If you see somebody that's standing up for your rights and they're going through hell on this, and trust me, and it'd be a great thing if people just reached out to those people and say, hey man, can I throw $25 your way, or so? Just donate. Give people. They're putting themselves on the line and changing their lives for it.
What are your thoughts about the library case or about the Fed's attacks on cryptocurrency? Give us a call and share your thoughts. 603-283-6160. There's more coming up. It is Free Talk Live.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com.
Are you tired of your taxes funding endless occupations around the world? Antiwar.com is run by people who understand that wars abroad become wars at home, wars on our freedoms. Antiwar.com is dedicated to bringing you the latest in news, views, interviews, and reviews from the top movers and shakers in the anti-occupation movement. Antiwar.com has it all, from thorough foreign policy analysis to interviews with whistleblowers who used to run the military-industrial complex. Anti-war, pro-free market. That's antiwar.com.
When Monster Hunter International discovers one of Isaac Newton's wardstones being auctioned off, they decide to steal it and use it to destroy the Chaos God once and for all. But a mysterious thief upends their plan, and it soon becomes a race against time as something much older and infinitely more evil awakens in the jungles of South America. Monster Hunter Bloodlines by New York Times bestselling author Larry Correia and Baen Books. Visit monsterhunternation.com for more.
I'm crazy about My Magic Mud. This is the most important oral care product created this millennium, and I'm not kidding. We all have different opinions on politics and issues, but we all have mouths. And I want yours to be as clean as possible, with teeth as bright as they were meant to be. I will never be without My Magic Mud. It's a little surprising, but man, does it work. If you only listen to one thing I say ever, go to mymagicmud.com and get 20% off with code FTL. mymagicmud.com, code FTL.
When every single dollar matters, think technology. I'm Holland Cook with Inflation Hacks. Ink cartridges for your printer are so expensive that office supply stores lock them up. Those Cartridge World refills work just fine. And even the office superstores will give you store credit for recycling used toner cartridges. About the extended warranty when you make a major purchase, every tech expert I've talked to says it's usually useless, pure profit, and the salesperson might be getting a bonus if you go for it. And why spend for software when you can use free online Microsoft Office? Programs like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And there are lots of free apps in Google Docs, too. How are you coping? Post your inflation hacks at andyoucanquoteme.com.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer-term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, and I want to tell you about Bitcoin.com. It's the best place to go to learn about cryptocurrency. If you're new to the subject and you're curious about it, don't just go buying it knowing nothing about it. Head on over to Bitcoin.com. Click Getting Started at the top of the page. It only takes a few minutes so you can learn about this important world-changing information. But if you do already know about it, news.bitcoin.com still has something for you. You can stay up to date on all the news and headlines that are relevant to you, all on a sleek and easy-to-use modern website. That's news.bitcoin.com. And with you today, it's Aria.
It's Bonnie.
And Matt.
And we're talking about the Jeremy Kauffman library situation, which has been going on for a very long time. I remember when some of the transcripts were released, I think last year or the year before. It was a while ago. And it was just completely absurd, these sorts of things that the SEC attorneys were asking Jeremy Kauffman, such as, why do you have a website? And he repeated, he wanted to clarify, are you asking me why a company has a website? And they said yes. Just completely ridiculous lines of questioning over and over again.
I remember that.
And it takes like hours, right? I feel like they're trying to fatigue you and make you slip up and say things because they really think that everybody they're going after has nefarious, reasons.
Yeah, because government people tend to be paranoid. And the more things start to slip out of control for them, the more paranoid and attacky they get.
Well, that makes sense, right? I mean, they are control freaks. They are predators. So, I mean, they project that on everyone else.
Sure. Totally. Even the judge, there was a whole section today where it was probably 5 minutes where the judge was trying to understand LBRY's business model. And he's like, well, what's the profit motive here? How are they going to make money? And, it's not, I don't think he realized that. And I can't answer that either. I don't know what Jeremy's philosophy is.
I'm sure LBRY has made money.
Yeah, but I think it's LBRY Inc., but they own Odyssey, and there's some credit card processing fees that go along with that. It's not a huge money, but there is a little bit coming there. But I
suspect Odyssey loses them a lot of money.
Probably, I would think. But he was so curious about, what the money situation is. How are they planning on making any money? And I understood that the way I read it was that judge can't even comprehend taking action unless there's a profit motive attached to it. And there are people out there who work on 100% pure principle. There
Certainly.
might not be any money in it at all. They do things out of pure principle. So, and I'm not saying that's what Jeremy's doing. I have no idea. I have no idea what LBRY's, motivations are, but this judge...
Yeah, it's not my business, not my company.
Right, yeah. And this judge had never, I don't think even, nothing like that had ever crossed his mind.
Interesting. So I'm glad to hear that, the judge is going to sit back for a bit at least and, try to educate himself on the subject.
Yeah, that's impressive. I'm not going to lie. I was pretty impressed by that.
I mean, this is a New Hampshire judge, and they tend to be better than your average judge.
He's a Fed.
He is a Fed,
He's
yes.
a Fed. But, he lives here, so that might be some kind of,
right,
bonus.
Bonnie, you also attended a hearing. Was that today as well?
Yeah, that was this morning too.
And this was for Frank Footloose, who has been on the show with us a couple of times. He was arrested last year or the year before, I don't remember now. initially he was arrested for protesting outside the governor's house. And then
that was January 2021.
Okay. Then the federal government wanted to give New Hampshire a bribe, and the people who were supposed to, the people who were authorized to make that decision said, no, we're not taking the money.
Executive Council.
Yeah. And then they did some stuff. They reconvened and they flipped some people. I don't know exactly what the process was. And they had a hearing about whether or not they were going to accept this money, a public hearing, which was attended by a bunch of people. They're being called the New Hampshire Nine, I think. Yeah, Footloose was one of them. One of the people arrested was arrested for saying amen following something that someone else said. And they were charged with disorderly conduct. She actually was charged with 2 counts of disorderly conduct, as I've learned recently. The second one was for saying, hey, they're arresting us. They charged her with disorderly conduct.
It's funny. I was there for that when that happened. And it was all of those people are basically, I don't want to say cop worshippers, but they're basically cop worshippers, like
absolutely.
Our police and blah, 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 and Donald J. Trump.
He's using the police. I was always like,
and the one lady who got arrested, I can't remember her name is.
Therese Grinnell.
Yeah. She's like, don't. It's not the police's fault. Let's not. I'm like, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Don't give them an inch. Don't give them an inch. They'll take every mile from you. They're operatives of the state. These people wake up every single morning. They put on their pants and shoes and shirts just like you do, except they decide that they're going to go attack somebody on behalf of a politician. Don't give them 1 inch. These aren't good people. Stop pretending that they're good people. They're not.
Their official language for like Rise Up New Hampshire or whichever group I think hers is Rise Up New Hampshire. They're always putting out flyers and stuff saying whenever they talk about the Noble Nine, Chris Sununu weaponized.
The Noble Nine?
Yes.
That's what they're calling themselves?
Yes.
That's a bit pretentious.
It is a little, but they keep calling themselves, they keep saying about the police that Chris Sununu weaponized the police. They are weapons. He used them for what they were completely signed up for and what they actually are.
They're literal tools.
But to be fair, I don't think these people deserve to get arrested. It's ridiculous.
It was dumb.
And,
it was an absolutely spurious arrest. It shouldn't have happened. I watched it happen. It was dumb. The fact that they were getting arrested while defending the police was like...
That's just insane.
And then they defended the police afterward. At least I think Therese did. She came out and made a statement to the effect of, hey, you guys, you need to stop protesting the police here. They're just doing their jobs and you're slowing everything down or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, she came out in... She came out when she was getting bail, and she said, like, everybody, we need to get out of here because the more we stand in here and make noise, we're making it take slower for everyone else to get out. That's just what they told her to get up to clear everyone out.
Well, she lives in a world where the police would never lie to her.
Yeah.
Even after they did horrible things to her that were arguably not lawful.
Yep.
At the very least, unconstitutional. So what happened at the hearing today?
Well, for one thing, you mentioned that they said that Therese Grinnell said amen, and that's why she got arrested. She says that she said amen after the Pledge of Allegiance. So, like, that the council did the Pledge of Allegiance.
Republicans do that sort of thing a lot.
Yeah, and she just said amen. And then today when the prosecutor was talking about it, he was like, and then Therese Grinnell says, amen! Like, screams it and, like, lifts his arms in the air. It was just like... Even if she did, it's like it's not like she said amen like a million times so nobody could hear Chris Sununu talking or something. That's like, these people are such freaking slime bags. It's so disgusting.
They are so bad. The prosecutor today, the SEC dirtball, I couldn't even catch his name. I can't even pretend that they're people in my head sometimes. I just have to pretend they don't have names. They're nameless and they don't need names. They're just scum.
They don't talk like humans. I was taking so many notes because I was a member of the press and I was like, I'll probably just write down everything so that way if anything interesting comes up. It was hard to write down the words of this prosecutor because he just talks like a lawyer. Like, he just start a sentence, not finish it, continue on with a different thought, not finish it. Just like, it was just word salad in legalese, and it was, oh my God, it's so weird. They don't talk like humans.
This guy today, he was like throwing his thumb back over his shoulder to point at Jeremy without looking at Jeremy and saying, the issuer of the securities, as if he's guilty already, the issuer of the securities.
Wow.
Yeah, is it their case to determine whether or not LBC is a security?
I don't know. I'm wondering if Jeremy thinks they get to declare it that.
They assert whatever they want and just hope that the judge doesn't look it up or something.
Right.
That's what prosecutors do.
It is a mess out there. 603-283-6160 if you want to weigh in. It is Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live's video archives have been on LBRY for years. LBRY is an uncensorable, decentralized, blockchain-based media sharing protocol, and we're big fans of it here on Free Talk Live. In 2020, LBRY launched Odysee, a video sharing website to compete with YouTube, and it's really taking off. Now with over 1 million channels, many of whom are disaffected YouTube creators. During YouTube's crackdown for not towing the government line on COVID, the Free Talk Live YouTube channel started receiving strikes and could be completely taken down at any moment. Thankfully, Odysee started offering live streaming, so we're now streaming live every night and posting our video archives permanently to Odysee. You can watch live or anytime on our Odysee channel by visiting video.freetalklive.com. If you want to go all in, download the desktop app at lbry.com, and then every video archive you watch, you'll help seed and keep it online forever. At minimum, we ask you visit video.freetalklive.com and follow us on Odysee today. video.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. In the UK, former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Foreign Secretary Liz Truss are the final two candidates in the race to replace Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Conservative Party members will now vote over the coming weeks on who will become the Conservative Party leader and therefore the Prime Minister. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has taken part in his final Prime Minister's questions, as FSN's Laura Macon-Isherwood reports from London.
This week, Mr. Speaker, probably certainly will be my last PMQs from this dispatch box.
Following what felt like a long resignation and amid a contest to find his replacement, Boris Johnson appeared in Parliament to take Prime Minister's questions for the final time. And he used it to point to the things he's most proud of doing through his premiership.
Restored our democracy and our independence. We've got this country through COVID.
But while Labour Party leader Sir Keir Starmer wished Boris Johnson and his family the best for the future, he was less than complimentary about the economic situation the Prime Minister will be leaving behind. Laura Macon-Isherwood, London.
The European Commission has asked member states to cut energy usage by 15% in response to fears over supply from Russia. EU officials say Russia is using energy as a weapon, with several countries partially or fully cut off already. As FSN's Julia Chapman reports from Brussels.
The energy cuts would be voluntary but could become legally binding in an emergency. There are fears that Russia could cut the EU off from gas supplies completely, a scenario European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen described as likely. The EU is working to secure alternative sources of energy, but parts of the continent remain heavily dependent on Russia. But the European Commission stressed that households will be protected.
Wildfires are continuing to burn across parts of Europe as a heatwave hits multiple countries. Firefighters have been tackling blazes in Greece, Spain and Italy after similar problems in France and the UK. There, the country has been facing another day of disruption after rail infrastructure and buildings were damaged due to extreme heat. In the US, nearly 2 months after the Uvalde school massacre that left 21 people dead, the school police chief in charge of law enforcement's botched response is about to be fired, as FSN's Tony Waterman reports from Texas.
Pete Arredondo has been on paid administrative leave for the past month, a situation that does not sit well with many of the Uvalde victims' families who are still grappling to understand why police waited over an hour to take down the gunman. At a heated school board meeting on Monday night, angry parents demanded Arredondo be fired. He's been identified as the incident commander on the day of the shooting, although he says he didn't consider himself to be in charge. Tony Waterman, Texas.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, and you are invited to take control of the airwaves. Talk about whatever is important to you. 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160 if you want to weigh in on the way that the federal government is, losing its mind over cryptocurrency. It's long overdue, right? And this is because the government takes forever to do anything. They're just now getting around to trying to sort out this Bitcoin thing. And the cryptocurrency world is already moving on to privacy coins and, smart tokens, smart contracts, all of this other stuff that the government hasn't even begun to understand because they're still trying to wrap their minds around the basics.
They are too slow. It's moving too fast. It is over. It's been over with since 2011. Like, that genie's out of the bottle. It's a big, powerful genie, and it's not going back in that bottle.
No, it certainly isn't, and they don't like it, of course.
No, and I've had this conspiracy theory that, considering how in debt to China the United States is, and like other countries and things, I wonder how much outside pressure is coming down on the United States government to fix these cryptocurrency people in the United States, because now it's everywhere. It's not something that's going to impact the United States government. It's something that's going to impact all governments everywhere.
It is going to impact the U.S. government the most, I think, because the U.S. government stands to lose the most. They have the world's reserve currency, and Bitcoin is, it's going to destroy the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar is doing a really good job of destroying itself, but Bitcoin isn't helping the situation. Bitcoin is poised to replace the U.S. dollar. I don't know whether or not it will, but it is a competitor to the U.S. dollar. And so the federal government is doing everything they can to destroy their competitor. And the friends of their competitors, such as the Crypto Six and Jeremy Kauffman. I'm surprised that the person running for, I think, Senate, Bruce Fenton here in New Hampshire, I'm surprised that since he's the creator of Ravencoin, that they're not going after him as well.
Hey, you know what? It's only a matter of time. They probably are. Who knows? When you got a paranoid government, everybody's a target. Everybody's a target.
And it's really easy for them because, of course, the average American apparently commits 3 felonies a day. I've never actually read that book. I need to read it because I'm curious, what felonies people are committing on a daily basis.
Is that the title of the book?
Yeah, 3 felonies a day. It's John Stossel, right?
Oh.
I don't know who wrote it.
Who wrote it? For some reason I associated that with John Stossel.
I don't know who wrote it. I've never actually even read it, but I'm really curious. A felony is a big deal. So what is it that Americans are doing on a daily basis that would result in 3 felonies? But the point is that the federal government wants to target you and charge you with something.
They can.
They can. They're going to find something.
There's a body of law in the United States. It's like if you stacked thin slices of paper, sheets of paper on top of each other, go like halfway to the moon. It's like impossible to follow all the law. You can't follow the law.
No, like the IRS tax code is one of the worst examples. It's something, I don't even remember now. Was it 90,000 pages or something to that effect?
That's nuts.
Yeah, absolutely incomprehensible for any human being to be compliant with a 90,000 page code.
Well, good thing it's optional.
Don't tell them that, though, because they are heavily invested in...
Yeah, they're religious about it. The government is, if you sit back and really look at it, the government is just one huge religion. It's a cult, and they have...
That's why Republicans say amen after the prayer. They're the most clued into it. And they don't even see their own idolatry. But what they're doing, God hates them, and he's going to send them to hell according to their own religious beliefs. Because they're committing idolatry every single day.
Yeah.
I'm always telling my parents, like, the Bible says you can't worship 2 gods. You can't worship God and money. But that's just the examples he gives. You can't worship the government and money. And my parents are always like, ha, 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 ha. We don't worship the government. We worship God.
But they do. They do worship the government.
When I'm sitting in those courtrooms and I'm looking at the guy in the black robe up there,
While you're sitting in a pew.
And you're sitting in a pew, and there's like signs of power everywhere, and
emblems. They've got their chants, they got their songs, their rituals. All of it.
They do, and it's just everywhere, and they believe in it. They are experts at it. They're so well versed in it. It's like bumping into it like a Jesus freak on the street. They know every chapter and verse in the Bible. Or, certain Muslims know every single word in the Quran. These religious people know every single word in, like, these judges and lawyers can cite case law going back to, like, the 1800s and 1700s and stuff. Like, they know it. They know the specific words that were used and how the words were arranged in the sentence because that's important to them,
I mean, I watched a judge tell Arya, sir, in the camisole or whatever he said, maybe that's just the word I would call it, in the tank top. What are you wearing? That's not the sort of thing somebody wears in here. I was literally like, my jaw was on the floor because
I was stunned. I did not expect that at all.
I mean, first of all, he called you sir was just like ridiculous. But the thing that was so shocking to me is like somebody just expecting that they can tell somebody what to wear because we're in a thing paid for by our taxes. Like, he really believes that when you're in his courtroom, you're in his country.
That's not Arya's Sunday best for his church.
Yep. I mean, that's what was the point I was trying to get at.
It's literally the same exact psychology driving it.
Yep. What I found recent was in a recent hearing that this judge did, he cited the court doesn't like this or something to that effect. Like, he literally views himself as the court.
As the court.
Yeah. He has ceased to be an individual and he has become part of this greater entity that he alone commands and can speak for. It's religious
it's
through and
mythology
through.
to the core, and they are adherents of it.
That's why individualism runs so counter to it, because it forces them to step back and go, I'm not this non-existent entity called, quote, the court or the United States of America. I'm a judge. I'm a human being. I'm a person.
Dave Anderson.
Yes. That's why it's so important to, remember that these rulers, these judges, prosecutors, politicians, all of them are just ordinary individuals. Mm-hmm. They're caught up in this religion, but that has no more reality to me. It has no more meaning to me than a priest saying, I speak for God. That's essentially...
Not at all. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And I don't think they do.
They don't.
But, that's coming up in November, and that's going to be... it's going to be fun, regardless of what the results are. So... I'm not the only one having fun, though. Footloose, he was yelling at a judge today. You mentioned earlier something about a CO2 monitor that got installed.
Tell us about that, Bonnie.
Courtroom.
I need to hear all about that.
That's what I really wanted to get into. The actual details of the day of the hearing weren't that interesting. There was one lady of the 9. Now it's the 8 because one lady got her charges dropped because they revealed this lady named Monica. I don't know her last name. She was only arrested because they mixed her up with another person in the crowd. So,
I sure hope it wasn't Zamora.
I don't know her.
No, it's not Zamora. Monica Zamora is the judge that David from New Mexico is obsessed over.
I was like, that sounded familiar for some reason. Okay, but yeah, so Monica...
they arrested the wrong person?
They arrested the wrong person in October 13th, 2021. So just now, they finally dropped the person who got arrested incorrectly as charges.
9 months later, they finally dropped the charges?
Yep.
I'm surprised she didn't take a plea deal. I mean... That's what most people do, right? And then
I don't think they've gotten to that yet because they took so long just to give these people their charges. They didn't give them the pink slips when they got out of jail. They had to think up how they were going to say that they're charging these people for no reason.
Yeah, they're scumbags, for sure.
Bad.
Well, the actual details of the case didn't get much more interesting than that. What I wanted to talk about was the fact that it was a packed court, but there could have been more. There could have been a few more people in there. There was nobody standing. You're allowed to have people standing, and nobody was standing this day. So it could have been way more packed. It was, silent. I was sitting there taking notes on my phone. Everybody that was listening was silent. I mean, Frank wasn't silent, but he is always doing that, and they understand because he has a it's called like post-concussion syndrome or something like that, and it's basically like he almost has like Tourette's. Like he just starts, if something pisses him off, he can't just be like, oh, I shouldn't talk in this situation. He'll start yelling at the judge. And the fact that I'm desensitized to that is so New Hampshire and so crazy because like all day he's like, listen, you're effing stepping on my rights. This is messing up my due process, just screaming at the judge, and the judge just has to be like, Frank, we will get to you, Frank.
603-283-6160. There's more coming up. It is Free Talk Live.
I gotta hit it.
We have some good news. The indictments against Ross Ulbricht in the District of Maryland were dismissed with prejudice, meaning they can never be refiled. This is especially good because those indictments contain the only charge ever made that Ross engaged in murder for hire. This was a serious allegation that Ross Ulbricht denies. It was never prosecuted or ruled on by a jury, but was trumpeted by the federal government and the media as if it were proven fact. The Maryland court held these indictments for almost 5 years, poisoning Ross's case and leaving him under a cloud of unproven allegations. allegations. As explained in Ross's appeal to the Supreme Court, the fact that the judge used these allegations to give Ross a draconian sentence of double life without parole violated his Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial. Judges are required to issue sentences based on convictions decided by a jury, not unproven allegations never even charged at trial. Although this is a positive development, the dropped indictment will not set Ross free. Now, a presidential pardon is Ross's only hope of freedom. Sign the petition at freeross.org. freeross.org.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com. There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com.
This is novelist Tom Robbins. When my mother was diagnosed with glaucoma, her conservative Virginia physician told her there was only one treatment that might ease her pain and save her eyesight. That treatment was medical marijuana, which he could not prescribe. I offered to get her some and teach her how to use it effectively, but my father objected because marijuana was against the law. So my mother, who loved to read and walk in nature, was condemned to grow cruelly, unnecessarily blind. Tragedies like this happen all the time, but they don't have to keep happening. To learn more about medical marijuana, call the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, and you're invited to join us, 603-283-6160, if you would like to weigh in. That's 603-283-6160. With you tonight, it's Aria.
It's Bonnie.
And Ian.
And it may seem to people like, man, people in New Hampshire get harassed by police a lot, or constantly getting arrested or charged in federal court or whatever. And I understand why it seems that way, because people in New Hampshire are actively resisting the state. It is the Free State Project, and you have to resist the state if you want to make any progress toward freedom.
Plus, a lot of people, they become, friendly with us because they got arrested, and then they found, other people who were supported them because they realized it wasn't right.
I don't think people get arrested in New Hampshire any more often than anywhere else. I mean, the state's blood, as far as its lifeblood of the court system, is people are being arrested for victimless crimes, and that happens everywhere all the time. Every court, every jurisdiction is packed full of innocent, peaceful people who've never harmed another person that get found guilty or plead guilty in probably 90+% of the cases, and then the court just rings the cash register and collects God knows how many thousands of dollars every single morning whenever they're in session all across the country. The only thing that's different here is, as you point out, Arya, we have activists who are not going to take a plea. They are going to go to trial. They are going to refuse to pay the fines if they're issued. They're going to be essentially, they're going to be a stick in the gears of the system as much as possible. And of course, we're part of that. We're not just reporting on things here in New Hampshire. In many cases, we are the ones being targeted. We are some of those activists, or we're there supporting our activist friends. And that's, I think it was Michael Harrison of Talkers Magazine who described Free Talk Live as a sort of a reality show in some ways, because we're actually out there really doing the things we talk about.
And none of us from the show were on trial today or anything, but five hosts from this show were at court today. So 5 of us were out, supporting people because we're actually interested in. Yeah,
Joa and Matt went to federal court, and you and I were. Oh, Penguin was there.
So 5,
and you and I were at.
That's sort of what I was getting at, though, is that it's to people who aren't familiar with New Hampshire and they're just listening to the show or whatever. They, oh my God, these people in New Hampshire are constantly getting arrested, and they're constantly talking about it on this show, and they know all these people who are being arrested, but it's really not. We do know a lot of these people who are being arrested, but that's because
and not one of them are a criminal who deserves any time behind bars. They're all peaceful activists,
right? Like the 3 who were arrested in Manchester during COVID-19 for the dastardly crime of putting up stickers.
Oh, yeah. Those charges got dropped.
That's the kind of stuff that, happens in New Hampshire all the time. And because there are activists who resist them, instead of taking plea deals, they end up getting the charges dropped more often than not.
In a lot of cases, yeah. Can we talk about this ridiculousness in the court today with the CO2 meter?
Yeah, apparently this courtroom has a CO2 meter for whatever reason, but meanwhile, the judge and the prosecutors are wearing face masks in July. And I realize New Hampshire's a little chilly, but it's July.
It ain't chilly today.
It was hot
It was in the 90s today.
Yeah, I can't imagine the self-oppression that is wearing a mask in this sort of weather.
Well, we're all from the South, and we can say that it's actually hot today.
Oh yeah, it's brutal today.
So in the middle of this boring, hearing on a motion to dismiss, then alarm starts going off on the side of the room.
And by the way, everybody was being quiet. Nobody was being disorderly.
No, they weren't.
Remotely.
Everybody was being, well behaved. And so this alarm starts going off, and the judge halts the hearing and says, "Everybody has to get out of the courtroom. There's a CO2 issue here. The alarm, our sensor is going off. It is a danger to your health to stay in this room," or whatever.
And this thing wasn't just in the corner of the room. Like sometimes you see those things in hotels and stuff plugged into the wall in the corner of like a lobby. This thing was set up on like the TV stand, right? That's what it looked like.
It was over by that, yeah.
Like there's a TV stand where you can see people doing their Zoom meetings. They had it set up there right next to like, it's still on the side of the judge and everything, like their side, but close to the pews.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, they purposely put it up. I think it was purposely that they put it up where it could sense people breathing from the pews. It's not a normal place to put a CO2 monitor.
Well, I don't know what a normal place to put a CO2 monitor is, but it was pretty clear to me that this device had been put into this courtroom because they know that this particular set of hearings, because this isn't the first hearing for this group of people. This was, there have been other hearings prior to this, and they've all been packed full of people. Like, as Bonnie put it earlier, some of them in the past have been standing room only. This one was close to that. It was very, very full. Almost every seat was completely full. But in previous hearings, there's been no CO2 alarm that has gone off. So I'm almost certain this was a brand new device that was put in recently. And it's just a little portable thing that
One bailiff said they put it in a week ago.
One bailiff claimed it was a week ago. Another bailiff claimed it was last August. So about a year ago. And I don't believe him for a moment.
Yeah, he's the worst.
But I don't know.
So
I don't know
you
who that
saw
one was.
the numbers that we're reading, right? Or you?
I did. Yeah, I looked over at it.
What were they?
It was over 1,000 parts per million.
Yeah, because Because I looked it up, and it's considered 10,000 parts per million is considered safe for an 8-hour.
I looked it up and I saw that 5,000 was considered dangerous. So I don't know. Maybe there's a variety of answers.
Well, I'm looking
there.
for some reason at the Minnesota Department of Health. That was the one that came up. And they say for an 8-hour period, it should not exceed 10,000 parts per million.
It wasn't even close to that then.
That's the thing. Like, how do we know what? All it did was beep. It didn't say like evacuate,
Well, no,
or anything like.
It's designed to go off at a certain number
So
once it crosses a number.
For all we know, they just set it up for go off once it crosses this
That's
number.
what they did.
Like that doesn't mean that crossing
That does not mean it's
means
dangerous.
anything.
No,
like
it
they
doesn't.
they could have changed the setting. Like the setting could have been normally at 10,000, but they changed it to 1,000.
That's correct. Yep. I don't know if it was 1,000 or 1050. I'm not sure where the actual provision, the number was where it went off. So anyway, the judge clears the courtroom of all of the people who were watching this trial, or this hearing. It wasn't a trial, but with the exception of the 9 defendants, the attorneys, and the media, which included me and Bonnie. So we stayed seated, and everybody else left with the exception of the defendants and the attorneys. And it was absolutely ridiculous. This woman kept people out of a public hearing and used the justification that, we'll open the doors. So they propped open the doors to the courtroom, and then they resumed having the hearing with 90 or 100 people it was outside of the courtroom. You could barely hear this hearing if you're sitting in the pews.
Yeah, these people half of them were wearing masks. You couldn't hear what the judge was saying half the time.
So there was no way you would be able to hear anything from standing out in the hallway.
And when Frank
having to
said
look in.
at one point, out of turn, he goes, "You're keeping people out of a public hearing." She was like, "Well, we have the doors open." And she also said,
Does that mean they're free to come back in?
No.
No, that they could hear from the hallway. That's what she was acting like. And no, that was impossible.
One woman actually did come in after the hearing was going for a little while with the courtroom almost
She was just
empty.
done with it and just came back in.
Yeah, a woman comes in and tries to address the judge. And judges don't like it when you're not part of the hearing and you start talking to them. They really hate that. And so this judge almost lost it.
I mean, that's
over this.
ballsy.
She was like red, the judge.
It's known that judges don't like that sort of thing.
Right, and all this woman was asking was, can we basically come back into the court? And the judge started going off on her.
Threatening to reschedule the whole thing.
She gets up, calls a recess, and storms out of the room for a while, and then eventually came back in and could not understand why it wasn't okay to just have people out in the hallway from a public hearing.
She kept saying they can call in because you can do that now because of COVID crap. But the person that had to be on the phone because she's one of the 9, but they live in Florida, kept telling them, we can't hear anything. We can't hear anything. We can't hear anything. And they were just like, whatever, we have to proceed. But yet she was trying to say, all of the public can call in and it's going to be fine.
Right.
That would have never worked.
They never gave the number to anybody. How would you have found the number to call in?
It would have been pointless. You couldn't hear anything.
Yeah, you couldn't hear anything if you called in anyway. So at some point, finally, after she was just refusing to understand why she was violating people's right to this public hearing, something the attorney said, I guess, persuaded her, like, hey, why don't we try letting people back in and prop the doors open, and maybe that'll take care of it.
Yeah, that wasn't the first thing she tried. Like, the doors were shut at the beginning. I don't think that it was unsafe, but if it was unsafe, the first thing you should have tried was to prop the doors open, get some air flowing in here. It's just people breathing. It was not more people than I've seen in churches.
Yeah. So
I've never seen a church get evacuated because there was a packed sanctuary. It was less people.
The whole thing's absurd, and it's probably completely unscientific. But regardless, she did relent finally and allowed people to come back into the courtroom, prop the doors open, and at that point, the CO2 meter sort of stabilized at around 920 for the rest of the hearing. But she said she was going to, if it went off again, or if there were any other disruptions, she was going to call a cancellation to the hearing and reschedule it.
That definitely seems a bit excessive. What are your thoughts about this CO2 monitor being used as an excuse to keep people out of the hearing? 603-283-6160.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it.
Get started with Bitcoin at bitcoin.com. That's bitcoin.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm. The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next, after the news, here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. In the UK, former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Foreign Secretary Liz Truss are the final 2 candidates in the race to replace Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Conservative Party members will now vote over the coming weeks on who will become the Conservative Party leader and therefore the Prime Minister. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has taken part in his final Prime Minister's questions, as FSN's Laura Macon-Isherwood reports from London.
This week, Mr. Speaker, probably, certainly, will be my last PMQs from this dispatch box.
Following what felt like a long resignation and amid a contest to find his replacement, Boris Johnson appeared in Parliament to take Prime Minister's questions for the final time. And he used it to point to the things he's most proud of doing through his premiership.
Restored our democracy and our independence. We've got this country through COVID.
But while Labour Party leader Sir Keir Starmer wished Boris Johnson and his family the best for the future, he was less than complimentary about the economic situation the Prime Minister will be leaving behind. Laura Macon-Isherwood, London.
The European Commission has asked member states to cut energy usage by 15% in response to fears over supply from Russia. EU officials say Russia is using energy as a weapon, with several countries partially or fully cut off already. As FSN's Julia Chapman reports from Brussels.
The energy cuts would be voluntary but could become legally binding in an emergency. There are fears that Russia could cut the EU off from gas supplies completely, a scenario European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen described as likely. The EU is working to secure alternative sources of energy, but parts of the continent remain heavily dependent on Russia. But the European Commission stressed that households will be protected.
Wildfires are continuing to burn across parts of Europe as a heatwave hits multiple countries. Firefighters have been tackling blazes in Greece, Spain and Italy after similar problems in France and the UK. There, the country has been facing another day of disruption after rail infrastructure and buildings were damaged due to extreme heat. In the US, nearly 2 months after the Uvalde school massacre that left 21 people dead, the school police chief in charge of law enforcement's botched response is about to be fired, as FSN's Tony Waterman reports from Texas.
Pete Arredondo has been on paid administrative leave for the past month, a situation that does not sit well with many of the Uvalde victims' families who are still grappling to understand why police waited over an hour to take down the gunman. At a heated school board meeting on Monday night, angry parents demanded Arredondo be fired. He's been identified as the incident commander on the day of the shooting, although he says he didn't consider himself to be in charge. Tony Waterman, Texas.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking in more detail today at the situation in Sri Lanka and whether it's a harbinger of popular uprisings and governmental downfalls in other parts of the world. The crisis in Ukraine and pre-existing global economic uncertainties suggests to some observers that Sri Lanka may just be the beginning of a wave of change, coming particularly to countries with long track records of instability. Jim Lindsay is with the US-based Council on Foreign Relations.
The Sri Lankan economic crisis that has now become a political crisis has been building for years. It involves a tremendous amount of mismanagement. And I think as you look elsewhere around the world, the countries that are going to be hurt the most by what is happening in Ukraine are countries that already have lots of problems, maybe of their own making, maybe not. What's happening in Ukraine will make it worse, particularly with issues of whether or not we're going to be able to get food that would normally come out of Russia and Ukraine onto the world market. Countries that have a lot of debt and don't have the ability to service it are in a difficult position.
He stresses that heavily indebted countries with looming potential food insecurity are especially susceptible to exactly the kind of people power that has been seen in Sri Lanka, with much uncertainty there still ahead. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
And the main news again. In the UK, former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Foreign Secretary Liz Truss are the final two candidates in the race to replace Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The European Commission has asked member states to cut energy usage by 15% in response to fears over supply from Russia. And wildfires are continuing to rage across parts of Europe as a heatwave hits multiple countries. There's more from us on Twitter at Feature Story. That's Feature Story News. Nick Harper reporting.
For years, Southwest Airlines has boasted having the most loyal customers in the industry. Now the low-cost carrier is calling on its most frequent customers to finally do something in return for the airline. The company rolled out their new Loyalty Goes Both Ways program in a new ad campaign.
You said you wanted free check bags, and we listened. Now you listen to us.
Southwest's program is part of a new trend of companies not letting their customers exploit them anymore. CEO Gary C. Kelly has gone as far as to record this radio ad, which Southwest started airing nationwide.
Hi, this is Southwest CEO Gary Kelly. If my wife calls asking about me, I need you to lie and say I was with you. Remember all those low fares I gave you.
To any Southwest customers thinking about saying they're too busy to help, Kelly has some harsh words saying, quote, "We're always there for our customers. To anyone who can't do us a solid now and then, f*** you. That's not loyalty, that's freeloading."
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, where you're invited to take control of the airwaves and talk about whatever is on your mind. 603-283-6160 if you would like to weigh in. Again, the number 603-283-6160. With you tonight is Aria, Bonnie, and Ian. And we've been talking about judges and cases developing here in New Hampshire. Of course, we'll continue updating you as we get information about those. I've been watching the Jeremy. I didn't realize he had a hearing today. I somehow missed that.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't have been able to go anyway because of other things I had to deal with.
You're talking about Jeremy Kauffman from Library?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But
it wasn't technically he that had the hearing. He's just the CEO of Library, so he was the one sitting there.
But other things are happening in the world for anarchists and libertarians, and one of those things is the HBO series Anarchists. And I haven't seen it yet, but evidently other people are... I knew, as soon as I heard about it, that the ANCOMs would go into attack mode. That's the anarcho-communists, right? Because it's happened to me when I ran for sheriff. If you're not an anarcho-communist and you call yourself an anarchist, they get really, really, really upset.
Oh, God.
Because they think that anarchy means there is no hierarchy. And, in a voluntarist society, there could absolutely be a voluntary hierarchy. There's nothing within anarchism that prevents it. But to them, no, any hierarchy, a private employee-employer relationship is a violation of the principles of anarchy.
Then who decides how to redistribute the wealth? Is that not a ruler? I mean, is that not a hierarchy? Who gets to be the person deciding how to redistribute the wealth?
Don't the ANCOMs want a government after they get rid of this government?
The ANCOMs don't.
Really?
Well, they want.
I don't know what magical.
To share money.
Well, I mean, and I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt that sure, you could collect 10,000 anarcho-communists together, and they can have their little society, and they can all be equal, and it can work just fine. I'm willing to give them that benefit of the doubt, but I'm also going to extend them the courtesy of allowing them to call themselves anarchists, because I don't see any reason why not. They don't allow that same whatever word I'm looking for, courtesy, thank you, to anarcho-capitalists. And, this was 90% of the comments I got when I did the AMA, the Ask Me Anything on Reddit, was from pissed off anarcho-communists who were upset that I dared call myself an anarchist. So I knew when this series came out, and it was just called The Anarchists and not The Anarcho-Capitalists or whatever these people would have rather, or the capitalists, as some of the really bad leftist memes are alleging, I knew that they were going to get flack for that. And evidently they didn't. But it's been a learning experience. Is that one of the criticisms you have? You have an article here about someone who's taking shots at the anarchists.
So the article is written by Etienne de la Boétie Squared, who's you may know as Howard. He's attended multiple Porcupine Freedom Festivals. I don't know if he's been to Fork Fest offhand. If I showed you his picture, you'd probably recognize him. He wrote a book that is very, very, against the government. I consider him to be a good guy, but in this particular case, he seems to be pretty critical of the anarchists and the people that they selected to
Is he jealous?
interview.
It sounds like jealousy.
I don't know if he's jealous. I mean, he hasn't been interviewed in the series yet, but I have seen him appear. Like he's been on the side of some of the shots. So I can't say for sure if that's what's going on here. I think he believes that this is essentially part of the, I'll just give you the subheadline here. The Anarchists. Is HBO trying to chump their audience about anarchy? It exposes how the organized crime CIA and monopoly media control perception using propaganda, engineered quote-unquote reality, and controlled opposition media to, quote, steer and smear, unquote, political movements. So he believes...
That was a lot of words.
He believes the Anarchists is a government-controlled attack on anarchists.
He's attacking the documentary. He's not attacking the people, right? He's not attacking
both. He's attacking the people that they've chosen to interview in this documentary series and the people who produced it.
That's just ridiculous to say that these people that have been shown so far are not anarchists. I mean, I don't even care what an anarcho-communist says because they're such a small little piece of the population. There has to be way more of them than there are just like regular anarchists.
Well, that isn't what this guy is alleging, right? He's not saying they're not really anarchists or whatever. He's just
that's
saying,
what I was asking.
It sounds like he's just saying, they picked bad anarchists to interview.
That's what I believe he is saying.
Bad in what way? Like not anarchists?
Well, I have to get into it. I mean, basically that, pick the wrong anarchists to interview. Pick the ones that would make anarchism, in his opinion, look bad.
No, they could have done us.
Mainstream media.
I mean, we do a good job of that.
It's not over yet. I mean, there's 4 more episodes. They may actually talk to Free Talk Live. I think we were interviewed by them, but it's been years since I was at this event, so I can't say for sure. So do you want to hear this story?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's from his Substack, artofliberty.substack.com. I'm not reading this because I agree with it, by the way, and I will have my criticisms of it, but it's the first criticism of the anarchists that I've seen about this new documentary by a purported anarchist. So Etienne de la Boétie Squared, he writes, there's a new propaganda series from HBO on the Anarchapulco Conference that is held every February in Acapulco, Mexico. He says, I've been an attendee since the initial conference in 2015 and have only missed 2017, 2021, and 2022, although in 2022 I attended and spoke at the anti-Anarchapulco conference called Agorapulco, which is held at the same time in Acapulco by and for those who have figured out the scam of Anarchapulco. My book, Government, the Biggest Scam in History Exposed, was the best-selling book at Anarchapulco in 2018, 2019, and 2020. And indeed, that's where I met Howard.
I'm sorry, but just saying the best-selling book at a festival is like not really a term.
I mean,
how many books were sold? Like 10?
It sounds like he's fairly salty about not having a more prominent role. That's me speculating, but that's what it sounds like. He's like, I was this influential figure, and then I realized it was a scam, and I started my own thing, and they didn't interview me.
Well, one thing that I was telling Bonnie about after this recent episode, there's been 2 of the 6 episodes that have been released thus far, is that anytime you put together an event, if it gets large enough, somebody's going to have some butthurt about it.
Oh, yeah.
They've been documenting Anarchapulco year after year, so now we're up to, I think in the last episode, 2017. So they looked at 2015, 2016 in the first episode, and now 2017. And they said they had 600 people attend that year. That's a decent sized festival for a convention event. And I said, if you've got 600 people showing up for an event, at least 6 of them are going to be really upset about something. They didn't like the way the person who took their tickets looked at them, or they didn't like that such and such was invited to speak, but so and so wasn't invited to speak. And there's always going to be somebody who has a falling out with maybe they did like the event, but then they had a falling out with the event organizer over some perceived wrong that was committed, and they aren't willing to forgive, and they don't want to talk about it, and they're going to go start their own event, which is fine. And in fact, that was something they focused on in the recent episode, was that there's this hippie couple that had moved there. They were arrested in the United States for marijuana, and then they, rather than go to court, they went ahead and ran to Mexico and started a new life down there. And they didn't like Anarchapulco. They thought it wasn't anarchist enough.
I thought their criticisms were so ridiculous I've never been to Anarchapulco, but they showed it in the first episode. They were saying these people we were afraid that we wouldn't be anarchists enough, and then we got there and we were the only real anarchists, and the people up on stage were they were only as anarchist as stuff you'd find on YouTube. It wasn't good enough for us when they got to go for free. It was just really ridiculous. It was I didn't like the comparisons to Fork Fest and Pork Fest, because no one started Fork Fest just because they were like, ugh, the speakers sucked this year at Pork Fest. It was more like, oh, you guys have Pork Fest cops. Anyways, why that conversation came up.
Everybody has their reasons for starting another event, and some people had different reasons for going to Fork Fest than others. Some people were really upset about the Free State Project. I personally wasn't, but a lot of people were, so I don't know if you can say that.
They were all less silly reasons.
But you don't know. You weren't there.
Well, from the people that have started it?
You mean
there were a few dozen people that were there. I'm sure they all had differing reasons for it. I would say that some people were really salty when it came to the Porcupine Freedom Festival.
And I would say that's a less silly reason than I didn't like the speakers this year. They were like, oh, I don't like the Porcupine Freedom Festival because
they kicked Ian out.
Also
didn't like the way it was, in the case of Anarchapulco, they didn't like the way it was being organized. They thought it was too centralized, and so they started something called Anarchaforco. And they started their own event, and I think that's great.
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
What they should
and it was
do.
after Fork Fest.
I mean, that's the way to solve these sorts of problems. If you don't like it, go do your own thing.
Right.
And maybe you'll like that. 603-283-6160. Have you seen The Anarchists on HBO? Especially if you're not a libertarian, I want to hear your opinions.
Yeah.
There's more coming up. It is Free Talk Live.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
After a devastating war, the alien visitors were driven back, and their willing human collaborators were left behind to face the music. When Emma Jean Anderson's ex-lover brings her from prison, Nathan Foster and his 14-year-old nephew Ben are tasked with bringing the pair to justice. An easy enough job until they discover something is inside Emma Jean, and the fate of the planet hangs in the balance. The Family Business by Mike Coopery from BaneBooks.com.
Is oral health important to you? If you don't like your own teeth, fresh breath, or kissing people, then by all means stop listening. Several years ago, I met Jessica Armand, founder and CEO of My Magic Mud, and I became passionate about the product that she created and never want to live without it. It's clinically proven to whiten teeth, but I find it does much more. They want you to love My Magic Mud as much as I do, so they're giving you a money-back guarantee plus 20% off. Go to MyMagicMud.com and use coupon code FTL20 at checkout. MyMagicMud.com, FTL20.
Why did you move to the Shire?
I moved here to the Shire because there's other people around who take liberty just as seriously as I do.
I moved to the Shire because I saw videos of people challenging authority and thought that I could get support myself. It called to me, like, do this, right now.
I wanted to be around people like me who got it, and once I got here, I knew there was nowhere else that I wanted to be.
I've always wanted to change the world, so I moved to the Shire to join people who were actually working towards doing the same thing.
The people here are awesome, loving, and positive. It was for the adventure and for the feeling of something important is happening here, and I just wanted to come to sort of be part of that.
Visit ShireSociety.com to read and sign the Shire Society Declaration and learn the reasons why, if you love liberty, you should immigrate to the Shire. Plus, connect with others via the forum at ShireSociety.com. That's ShireSociety.com. There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer-term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, where you're invited to take control of the airwaves, share your thoughts and opinions, especially if you've seen The Anarchists on HBO and you're not a libertarian. I'm trying to get some of my non-libertarian friends to watch it, but since they're not libertarians, they're not particularly inclined to watch a documentary about anarchists in the first place, no matter how dramatized it is. And I'm sure it's plenty dramatized. I mean,
well, there's plenty of drama between libertarians and anarchists, just like any other group of humans. Yep. When you put several hundred people in the same place, turns out not all of them are going to get along.
I mean, plus this one had a murder in it, so I mean, it's got plenty of room for them to dramatize the facts a bit. So I'm sure it's entertaining. But
I think it's been pretty interesting.
I'm struggling to get any of my non-libertarian friends to watch it.
Watch it with you?
No, just to watch it at all.
Oh.
I mean, they're the opinions that I want to hear from, because I know anarchists and libertarians are going to love it, with the exception of this guy, right? It's free marketing for libertarianism.
Well, that's why I thought this was an interesting article, because when I first heard about this documentary series, what I heard about was that, the guys who produced this are anarchists, and when they were doing a deal with HBO, they managed to get the agreement with HBO to where HBO wasn't going to meddle. Basically, that was the claim with this, was that the editing, the storyline, the writing, everything was being done by the people who were involved in the shooting of it, and that they're supposedly anarchists themselves, so therefore this should be a good thing, meaning that it wasn't being interfered with by people from the outside, if that's true. Right.
And from what I've heard, that's largely been how people have interpreted it.
I feel like that's the case so far. This guy disagrees. The guy we're reading here, Etienne de la Boissy Squared, which is a pen name, he disagrees. He thinks this is a completely controlled operation from like the CIA or whatever. So, is the truth somewhere in between? Is he completely right? He's got more to say.
I don't know why the CIA would bother with Anarchapulco. I mean, it is a thing, and it has had its successes, and I don't mean to suggest that it hasn't. But if the feds want to target a successful liberty migration, New Hampshire is the place they're going to target.
Well, and that may be a good counter to what he's saying here. I think that his argument would be that this is to make anarchists look bad. That's the whole point of this.
Anarchists don't need the government's help in doing that. I say this as an anarchist. We make ourselves look bad without any assistance from the government.
Shall I continue?
Yeah, absolutely.
So he talks about his history at Anarchapulco, having attended on multiple years. He sold his book there. He says he was a speaker in 2019.
Selling book.
For several years in a row.
He was a speaker in 2019 and a main stage speaker in 2020, where somebody said that his speech burned the house down. His foundation threw one of the biggest and coolest parties of the conference, which has drawn many as 300 attendees to their fundraiser for their favorite turtle sanctuary in Acapulco, which I attended one of those. It was pretty cool.
We have to review this. So far, he said, my book was the best-selling book at a conference of 600 people. He said my party was the coolest party, and he said one person told me my speech burned the house down.
Well,
just looking at this person's personality. So far.
The Porcupine Freedom Festival that I just attended in late June of last month, I suppose about a month ago, it had a crowd of between 2,500 and 3,500 people, depending on how you're counting and who you're counting. To my knowledge, there was only one person there selling his books.
Alu.
So he was, by definition, the best-selling author at the Porcupine Freedom Festival, and he may have only sold one or two.
I think he sold more than that.
Oh, he sold a lot because he was telling us But yeah, I see what you're saying. If he only sold one or two, he'd be the bestseller.
Yeah. I don't want to attack Howard. I like him personally. He's been a co-host, a guest co-host here on Free Talk Live.
I'm just being a realist about what he's written.
He does sound really salty. He was like, I'm a mover and shaker, and they'd ignored me.
And maybe he's controlled opposition. I don't know, but he's definitely driving a wedge between people in this particular event. But maybe they did something to offend him. I don't know. He says, I don't think there's another attendee and/or speaker better positioned to pull the curtain back on the scam of Anarchapulco and the HBO documentary series The Anarchists, and expose how the CIA steers political movements while their control of perception Hollywood propagandists create quote-unquote reality television in an attempt to trick their audiences by controlling the information they receive on a given topic, i.e. voluntarism/peaceful anarchy, the most powerful political movement in the world, because anarchists are exposing the illegitimacy and criminality of, quote, government.
I'm
unquote.
A little confused. Who is he calling the Hollywood actors or something?
I don't think he's saying anything about actors. He's talking about Hollywood.
Hollywood infiltrated propagandists. Who is that?
HBO in this case.
HBO, okay.
So here's a quote from the mighty Wurlitzer.
It is very unclear what this guy is asserting is the problem exactly.
He's saying this is a controlled documentary series for the purposes of undermining the anarchist movement.
But for some reason, that sentence made me think that he was saying, like, of course they chose this group of people because they'll go along with it. It's like, how is choosing this group of people to look at worse than choosing another group of people if it's HBO's fault, right?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
If HBO did according to this guy, if HBO came and did a documentary about anarchists here, it should have the same effect, right? So why is he saying it's this group of people's fault?
I'm sure they would also, if it was indeed what he's saying, they would also try to, black mark us and make us look bad if they chose this particular group. As if indeed this is an attack on anarchism and it's so what it is that he says.
Then what you're saying is he's saying that the HBO people are trying to make these people look bad. So he's not trying to say these people are bad anarchists and bad people.
He's going to say that later too.
Okay, then what? I don't even get how he can say that.
He's going to say he's going to say that they chose these particular people to look at because they make anarchy look bad.
Okay.
Quote, I believe the Anarcho-Polka, this is a quote from somebody else, a book called The Mighty Wurlitzer, How the CIA Played America. Quote, I believe the Anarcho-Polka Conference is an intelligence agency organized crime operation to steer the modern peaceful anarchist, voluntarist, anarcho-capitalist, and crypto-anarchist movements into drugs, controlled opposition, voices/media operations, unintelligible, unwholesome, or controlled artists, infighting, etc., while smearing/tarring the movement through association with con men, drug dealers, and murder, while stealing the oxygen from legitimate liberty movement conferences, artists, and authentic voices. The operation is very similar to the now admitted CIA's creation/promotion of admitted CIA asset Gloria Steinem and Ms. Magazine to steer the agency-created and controlled feminist movement. So that's the claim.
That's a hell of an accusation, and it would have more weight if I knew any anarchists who agreed with him. But all of the libertarians and anarchists I know who have seen this show, including some of the people who were in it,
they've been liking it,
have enjoyed it. They were like, yes, this is giving us a fair shake.
That's what I was thinking the whole time you were reading that. I was like, it doesn't make these people look like a bunch of drug pin, horrible people. So far, I mean, we're only on episode 2.
I get where you guys are coming from, but if you were to look at it from the outside perspective, then I can see the argument. Because they are talking about people who sold marijuana, and to somebody who thinks that's bad, it'll make anarchists look like drug dealers,
well,
right?
To somebody who thinks like that, the word anarchist is that all they need to hear.
No doubt.
So it doesn't really matter. You can't really make people look like something they're not. Make them look like,
And I think he's going to make this point as well, like focusing on Jeff Berwick, which is he's the main character in this particular series. I mean, Jeff Berwick is, at least at one time, was kind of this womanizing drunk, right? Like he's not, and he's been accused, whether it's true or not, he's been accused of all of these various different financial scams, which haven't been brought up yet in this series, but that may be coming too. So, anyway, there's more.
Do you think this is controlled opposition? 603-283-6160. It is Free Talk Live.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market. Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. Physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. In the UK, former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Foreign Secretary Liz Truss are the final 2 candidates in the race to replace Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Conservative Party members will now vote over the coming weeks on who will become the Conservative Party leader and therefore the Prime Minister. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has taken part in his final Prime Minister's questions, as FSN's Laura Macon-Isherwood reports from London.
This week, Mr. Speaker, probably, certainly, will be my last PMQs from this dispatch box.
Following what felt like a long resignation and amid a contest to find his replacement, Boris Johnson appeared in Parliament to take Prime Minister's questions for the final time. And he used it to point to the things he's most proud of doing through his premiership.
Restored our democracy and our independence. We've got this country through COVID.
But while Labour Party leader Sir Keir Starmer wished Boris Johnson and his family the best for the future, he was less than complimentary about the economic situation the Prime Minister will be leaving behind. Laura Macon-Isherwood, London.
The European Commission has asked member states to cut energy usage by 15% in response to fears over supply from Russia. EU officials say Russia is using energy as a weapon, with several countries partially or fully cut off already. As FSN's Julia Chapman reports from Brussels.
The energy cuts would be voluntary but could become legally binding in an emergency. There are fears that Russia could cut the EU off from gas supplies completely, a scenario European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen described as likely. The EU is working to secure alternative sources of energy, but parts of the continent remain heavily dependent on Russia. But the European Commission stressed that households will be protected.
Wildfires are continuing to burn across parts of Europe as a heatwave hits multiple countries. Firefighters have been tackling blazes in Greece, Spain and Italy after similar problems in France and the UK. There, the country has been facing another day of disruption after rail infrastructure and buildings were damaged due to extreme heat. In the US, nearly 2 months after the Uvalde school massacre that left 21 people dead, the school police chief in charge of law enforcement's botched response is about to be fired, as FSN's Tony Waterman reports from Texas.
Pete Arredondo has been on paid administrative leave for the past month, a situation that does not sit well with many of the Uvalde victims' families who are still grappling to understand why police waited over an hour to take down the gunman. At a heated school board meeting on Monday night, angry parents demanded Arredondo be fired. He's been identified as the incident commander on the day of the shooting, although he says he didn't consider himself to be in charge. Tony Waterman, Texas.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, and you're invited to share your thoughts and opinions. 603-283-6160 if you'd like to do that. With you in the studio tonight, it's Aria.
It's Bonnie.
And Ian.
And we're talking about the anarchists here and whether or not it's controlled opposition by the CIA. Of course, people in the YouTube chat, the troll chat as I like to think of it, are alleging that Free Talk Live seems like controlled opposition because, that makes sense with, 3 of its co-hosts, being arrested. Its creator and founder being arrested and charged in a federal indictment. Yes, that's very much what you would expect the federal government to do with their controlled
That's how deep
opposition.
cover we actually are. We're so deep cover that the feds don't even know that we're also feds.
So that's some effective cover for sure. I mean, we're so good at it that we helped people achieve liberty. It's unclear why exactly we would be controlled opposition, and it's unclear to me why the anarchists would be controlled opposition. But before we get back into it, let's go to the phones. We have Dave Ridley on the line from RidleyReport.com. Dave, you're on Free Talk Live.
I think Dave Ridley is controlled opposition.
Well, he's not doing a very good job of hurting libertarianism in New Hampshire, that's for sure. He's aiding and helping libertarianism in New Hampshire.
I'm getting them concentrated all into one place where they can be rounded up.
Oh my God. Okay, don't say that.
One place that's only 150 miles tall.
Is that really how?
Okay, so
is that really how
right.
the length of New Hampshire? Okay.
Oh wow.
I think north south. It's roughly. I don't know exactly.
Okay.
Okay. So I was doing up a summary, not exactly a summary, but just some information for the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance for the Liberty Dinner, which is coming up on Saturday in New Hampshire. And while I was looking, for some legislative successes, and while I'm in the process of looking, my jaw just hits the floor because I found a legislative failure that is very interesting. And there are a lot of, obviously the NHLA has they get a lot of things through and they stop a lot of stuff. But there's one thing that they weren't able to stop, and they tried. They had, it was on their gold standard that they hand out at the door to the Senate, when the Senate's in session.
And that is
a flyer.
For those who don't know, that's a flyer that tells representatives and senators how they should vote if they value liberty.
That's right.
So, vote yes on this and no on this or whatever.
Right.
From a libertarian perspective.
Anyhow, the state government decided to pass this legislation restricting telehealth.
What is telehealth?
It is a severe restriction. Or at least as I read it, I read the bill. I read part of it anyway. The telehealth.
Yeah. What is it?
So it's just like when you go to your doctor via phone, via Skype or whatever.
Okay.
And what's the restriction?
So they're saying that out-of-state providers are not allowed to provide telehealth to New Hampshire residents in New Hampshire unless they come to New Hampshire or whatever, or fill out all this paperwork inside New Hampshire to become like a licensed New Hampshire medical provider.
That's stupid.
Wow.
That's crazy. Like, I have a new doctor now, but a year ago I was using this entirely online doctor system. It's kind of funny that the doctor system that I was using online was through an app, and it was the exact opposite of what I get with the doctors I have now. Like, this was, you're in and out. They don't spend any time getting to know you or anything like that. But it was all online. They had no offices or anything like that. And it worked. It was convenient.
How could they even control that? Those people don't live here, so they can't, like, they're not going to extradite them to charge them criminally.
In Hawaii have to come to New Hampshire and get, like, what if they just have one patient that, I mean, they're just not going to do that.
Yeah, I don't know how they would enforce something like that. There is a provision in there that's like, there's certain consultation that is allowed by telephone or by whatever from outside the state. So it's not a blanket prohibition, but it's definitely, I'm sure it's going to have a chilling effect. And it's just like one of those things where you had to take the one thing that got better during the pandemic, and that's what you had to smash down.
Damn. Yeah, it opened up a lot of options for people, right? Who, don't want to go wait in a doctor's office for 3 hours to spend 5 minutes to spend an additional hour in the actual appointment room waiting on the doctor and then spending 5 minutes with that doctor. It turned doctor visits into something that took like 15, 20 minutes of your time. And it opened up competition, right? Instead of having to select from, 10 doctors here in Keene, New Hampshire, almost all of which are affiliated with Cheshire Dartmouth.
The hospital.
Yeah.
So I think what will happen is that people who know about this stuff they're just gonna call their provider, if their provider's in Massachusetts or something like that, which is very common for New Hampshireites. They're just gonna tell them, oh yeah, I'm in Lowell, and I can't make it down to Shrewsbury.
Those are Massachusetts
or
towns.
Something like that. So I'm calling you by telehealth.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is, we're still not in control here, right? Like, the Free Staters are still a tenth of the legislature. They've got 40 or 50 seats, according to the Democrats who've been investigating those things, and so that's not enough to be a majority. It's we got a ways to go before that's going to happen, and that means there's going to be some losses along the way, and you found one.
Yeah, thank you so much for the call tonight, Dave.
Before Dave goes, did he say he's going to be at the Saturday thing? Did he say he's giving a speech?
He said he was doing research.
Oh, no, I won't be there. I was just going to do a little write-up to help them with their flyer.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying you were doing it for a speech. Sorry. Okay, that's
speaking of which, if you know some important, liberty, a thing that the Liberty Alliance has gotten accomplished that I don't know about, then be sure to tell me.
Oh, okay.
I would talk to Zephyr.
Oh, yeah.
Zephyr is the go-to guy. He's like their #1 bill reviewer. For listeners that don't know, the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, in addition to actually doing the research on how people should vote, it's actually people like Zephyr that do the dirty work of actually reading these bills and rating them. So
that sounds horrible.
It is.
How do I get in touch with him?
I can get him to email you or something. Do you have an email that's easy for me to...
Yeah, I've got his email.
Don't say it on the air at any rate. We wouldn't want that.
Okay, sorry.
But, you have ways of contacting us outside of the show.
I'll put you in touch, Dave, with Zephyr. Thanks. But Zephyr does this bill review process along with other volunteers. He's just the #1 guy, like, by a mile.
I've done it.
He's reviewed
I did like 3.
way more than any other person in the last year.
He did like 800, and I did like 3.
I don't know if he did 800, but he did several hundred, I think. He did a lot. And
that's intense.
So he reads these bills. It's a hard job because you have to be able to read this, legalese stuff. He reads them, he comprehends what they're doing, and then he rates them. And they have like a whole system, like an online system where you can, check off different boxes or whatever. And it makes it as easy as possible to go through this, and it's automated basically, and it files it automatically. And that's how they come up with the recommendations for the representatives and the senators to vote. And then at the end of the year, whenever the session is done, I think it's usually done by June, whenever they finish their legislative session, because New Hampshire's legislature is only part-time.
Right.
But when they finish up, then the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance cooks up their liberty ratings, and they look at the different bills that they consider to be the most oriented for or against liberty, and they cook up a series of letter ratings. So A through F, and then below F is constitutional threat. And they will give these ratings to all 400 state reps and all 24 state senators And at the dinner that Bonnie and I are going to be attending this weekend with other supporters of the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, they will give out those ratings. So they'll release the ratings for this last session, and they'll announce who the number one most liberty-oriented state representative was. And so that'll be cool.
I look forward to hearing who that was. Jeremy Kauffman, I think, is going to be at this event as well. He's doing a meet and greet this coming Saturday. I assume it's at the same event because it doesn't seem like he would have a different event.
I don't know.
But Zephyr, when he first moved here, he was planning on becoming an attorney. Is he still working on
that?
Yeah. That would be why he has the advantage with reading the legalese. It's probably good training for him, realistically.
Yeah, probably.
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, it's great work, and I'm glad he's doing it. And
by the way, this
enjoys
is
it.
something that anyone can do. So if you really like what's happening here in New Hampshire, you like what you're hearing about, but you're saying to yourself, oh, I can't move, or I can't move anytime soon, and you still want to help, obviously giving money to these organizations helps, but you can actually give time to the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, and you can review these bills even though you don't live in New Hampshire. So that's one way that you can help.
I think it's kind of fun. The only reason I only got 3 in was because I joined late, so all the ones that were left to review were like completely really, really hard and complicated.
There's more coming up. 603-283-6160. It is Free Talk Live.
The easiest thing in the world for a reader to do is to stop reading, according to the late, great Barney Kilgore, who became managing editor of the Wall Street Journal in 1941 and grew the paper's circulation from 33,000 to 1 million by the 60s. And he'd be pleased to know that his paper is one of the few that people now pay to read online. Someone else pre-internet who realized that attention is fragile? Motown Records founder Berry Gordy. In the early 60s, when his label dominated the charts, he'd bring a dozen real people into the Hitsville, USA studios and audition songs. And he'd ask, if you were down to your last dollar, would you spend it on this record or would you buy a sandwich? Today, attention span seems like an oxymoron. For tips on cutting through the clutter, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in Liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
Free Talk Live.
So when talking to a liberal, you have to be politically correct. But when talking to a conservative, you have to be patriotically correct.
Yeah, it's funny how conservatives forget while they're making fun of liberals and how triggered they get over, social issues. But if you don't stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance or the national anthem at a hockey game or something, you might get some glares. You might get some people really upset.
I actually had somebody tell me when I was at the State House last week, you should really be standing during the pledge. No, I shouldn't. I don't pledge allegiance to things that don't, give some kind of reciprocal
I'm a slave
protection.
To a piece of cloth. This is my stupid brain-dead life. Amen.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, where you're invited to take control of the airwaves and talk about whatever is important to you. 603-283-6160 if you would like to weigh in. That's 603-283-6160. With you tonight, it's Aria.
It's Bonnie.
And Ian.
And we're talking about the anarchists here, and just in general, libertarian anarchist perceptions just in society. When people think of anarchists, right, they think of a rioter. Yes. And that's why I love this HBO series so much, because it's exposing people, many of them for the first time ever, to the idea that an anarchist is a peaceful person.
Yeah, to the series' credit, the first 5 minutes of the first episode, they address the bomb-throwing anarchists' viewpoint, right? They literally have an image of somebody throwing a Molotov cocktail, and they freeze frame it, and they say, not that kind of anarchist, and they talk about how this movement is a peaceful movement and has nothing to do with that. So,
right, because those people aren't anarchists. They're attempting to use force and violence.
Themselves.
Yes, but they're attempting to use force and violence to achieve their goals,
right?
Which is the behavior of a state.
So that's why, so far, I think this is a pretty good presentation because they are defining what anarchist is from our perspective, this peaceful, liberty-loving group of people. But from the perspective of the Art of Liberty Foundation's Etienne de la Boissy Squared over at his Substack, he says this is actually controlled by the CIA. The HBO Hollywood thing is they're trying to paint anarchists as a bad group and essentially badmouth us. And so, do you want me to keep this thing rolling here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any proof of what you were saying earlier, where you said originally you had heard that they got a good contract with HBO so that?
No, I just heard that somewhere. I don't remember what the source was.
Well, it's unlikely that we would ever see the contract that they signed with, HBO.
I would say thus far, it seems as though they are pro-anarchist, and he'll make his argument here, and it's an interesting argument. The argument is that they're still trying to make us look bad.
Well, I mean, they have to make a show. Yeah. There has to be something entertaining there for people to enjoy. And
they are showing that people are having infighting, which, of course, is true. That's not false. You can't cover that up. Anybody who gets involved in these movements. And I guarantee you the same things happen in, the Green Party or the Democrats and the Republicans, because that's just how people are. They have petty disagreements. They have cliques. They fight with one another over stupid crap. Somebody's going to cheat on their wife. Things like that happen. Yeah. So, going on.
So tell us more about his complaint.
So he says, why would the organized crime government, and he puts that in quotes, want to steer and smear the voluntarist peaceful anarchism movement? The peaceful anarchism/voluntarist movement has the potential to be the most important political movement in the world for a number of reasons. First, voluntarists and peaceful anarchists expose the illogic and immorality of statism in the only principled defense of real freedom against the artificial, fake, two-party political system. Second,
that's true, but the average person isn't interested in that level of freedom. That's just a reality that we're going to have to face. It may be the most important movement or whatever, but it still only is interesting to less than 1% of the world's population.
Well, yeah, average people just don't care about politics.
And also, what does the government have to do with this?
Well, he's pointing out that, and there is a lot of evidence that governments infiltrate movements. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt that that's what the FBI does. They send in infiltrators, they send in instigators, agents provocateur. They want to cause drama. They want to cause strife and hatred and disagreement and break apart movements. That's just a fact.
Is he claiming that about this group of people, or is he claiming it about the HBO people?
I think all of the above. Second, because the ideas of peaceful anarchy and voluntarism have been suppressed and purposely mischaracterized. The people in the movement who've been able to see through the lies and propaganda of statism are an amazing and very powerful group. Additionally, because voluntarism and anarchy are morally and intellectually consistent, advocate nonviolence, and have the potential to unite society behind the non-aggression principle, and is the only political solution that is fair for all, meaning no one gets the ring of power, he says it has the potential for, and indeed is destined for, viral growth. I don't know if I agree with him on that, but I would love to be that to be the case.
Yeah, I see libertarian migration as being the only way that there's ever a libertarian society.
Agree, and that's what's happening here in New Hampshire.
Yes.
Finally, the crypto-anarchist and liberty movements were at the forefront of studying, understanding, and developing uncensorable, stateless currencies like e-gold, gold money, and digital liberty dollars. So having one of the world's first conferences that focused on cryptocurrencies would offer the opportunity to steer some of the developing crypto-anarchists into NSA-developed crypto solutions and rob a portion of them by ensuring that crypto scams are featured prominently in both the conference and the podcast supporting it. Controlling the opposition is a tactic that the liberty movement has seen played out over and over again. And then he gives a couple of examples, like the Tea Party movement, with people on the right, like Dick Armey, Sarah Palin, and FreedomWorks hijacking the largely small L Tea Party movement with tens of millions of dollars and co-opting it into the Republican Party. He then gives the example of the Women's March on Washington, where he says, I've broken down in detail how 60-plus George Soros-connected groups front-ran the opposition to organized crime puppet Trump by bringing 500,000 women to Washington, D.C. for the Women's March on Washington and steering them into worthless slogans, leftist speakers, acceptance of suffering, while dressing the crowd in pussy hats. Given the incredible importance and potential power of voluntarism, wouldn't we be naive not to believe that organized crime governments wouldn't attempt to steer our movement as well?
But who is saying that? Just because there's one documentary being made that's pretty good.
Well, nobody's
saying the government would never infiltrate a libertarian or an anarchist group. Nobody's saying that.
I think he's just pointing out that can happen.
Yeah, it absolutely could happen. And, it's weird that we haven't heard of any success stories about federal government infiltration of the liberty movement, especially here in New Hampshire with so many people.
What do you mean success stories?
Like you hear the success stories about other groups, but you can find the connections where, hey, this was really the FBI doing this or whatever.
Proud Boys guy that was arrested.
Yeah, you have all those sorts of things about other movements.
Usually that comes out after arrests, and then maybe somebody doesn't take a plea deal and they go to trial.
Yeah,
and
but it's
then
been 20 years.
That's true. I mean, that just goes to show that they haven't been able to successfully finagle people into violence, right? They've
that's
tried.
What I think, yes.
I would say they have definitely sent infiltrators into this movement. I mean, they certainly tried to flip our co-host Nobody when he was Rich Paul into wearing a wire into the Keene Activist Center, which he refused to do. So we know about that because he refused it. So we don't know about how many people they did get to wear a wire, about how many people they did send in informants or undercover agents, one or the other, and who did try to float the ideas, fishing expedition of, let's go bomb something or let's go shoot this or that. And what happens when these people come in is they don't get any traction. They get kicked out. They get people say, look, this is a peaceful movement. We don't want to have your violent ways here. Unless you can not be talking about violence, you need to not be around. And so it just goes to show, Bonnie, that in 20 years, they haven't managed to be successful in the way of getting someone to go along with their plans. But I guarantee you they've had people in this movement and probably still do.
I wasn't saying they haven't. I was saying that they haven't been successful.
Well, it's been successful in that there's certainly people in the movement, and they're writing things down, and they're recording things, and they're gathering information constantly.
I suppose what I meant was they haven't been successful in controlling the opposition here.
We don't know. We don't know how high up they've gotten in the ranks.
I guess not. I mean, it could be me or you. It could be Dennis Pratt or even Jeremy Coffin. But at some point that sort of paranoid conspiracy type of thing, it starts to undermine the work you're trying to do.
So he says here in this story, so if the odds are there is an organized attempt to steer the movement, then let's look around and see who's doing the steering and where it's being steered. And this is where he starts to actually look at the documentary. So he says the number one suspects.
That's a big assumption, though. I mean, yeah, if we operate under the assumption that you're correct, sure, we can proceed as though you're correct. But he hasn't demonstrated that he's correct at this point.
Yeah, about what part?
about the anarcho-polko being infiltrated and controlled opposition by the feds. Sure, if we grant him that and assume it's true, the rest of what he's going to say will probably make sense. But we have to keep in mind at all points here that he has not demonstrated that's true, and we are taking it as an assumption for the sake of the argument.
Well, now he's going to look at the people who are involved. So he says the number one suspect, Anarcho-Polko and The Anarchist, which is the documentary series we've been discussing. And he points out that there's Jason Blum who's involved. You might have heard of Blumhouse Productions. Blumhouse Productions makes low-budget horror movies.
Ooh, what are they called?
Blumhouse.
BLUM.
Okay.
And when I say low budget, I don't mean that low budget. I mean still Hollywood level, but cheaper for Hollywood, basically.
Like Troma?
No, I wouldn't say Troma's B. Troma's like B level. This is still Hollywood kind of level, but they do it on a cut budget. There's probably some movies you've heard of. The Purge.
I think they're pretty mainstream,
for instance. Halloween Kills, the recent Halloween remakes have been Blumhouse Productions movies. So
I'm looking forward to Halloween Ends. Apparently that's coming out this October. Yeah.
Didn't one come out last year?
The year before, I think.
Oh.
I don't recall exactly when it came out. But
so he's going to get into the namesake, Jason Blum, who's apparently the executive producer of The Anarchist.
Do you think The Anarchist has controlled opposition if you've seen it? Or if you're not even a libertarian and you've seen it, give us a call, 603-283-6160. I want to know people's opinions about this. It is Free Talk Live.
Are you tired of governments around the world killing innocent people? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin is money that cannot be inflated or controlled by any state. By continuing to use their money, you're perpetuating the killing. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available to you now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at Bitcoin.com. It's Bitcoin.com.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com. The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Caroline Malone. President Biden has indicated that a proposed visit to Taiwan by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, does not have the support of the U.S. military. The president's comments come hours after Beijing warned it would take forceful measures if the visit to Taipei went ahead. Our Washington correspondent Simon Marks reports.
This trip by Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan is mooted but not yet confirmed. She was supposed to visit Taipei back in April, but then tested positive for COVID-19 and dropped the idea. Now, President Biden has told reporters that the US military thinks it's not a good idea for the speaker to make the journey. Beijing agrees, warning it will take forceful measures if Nancy Pelosi becomes the highest-ranking US government official to set foot on Taiwanese soil since 1997. President Biden did not indicate whether the Pentagon's opposition effectively derails the speaker's plans, but he did say he expects to speak to Chinese President Xi Jinping within the next 10 days, boosting speculation that the president may have now decided to alleviate some of the Trump-era tariffs that are still in place against Chinese goods.
US President Joe Biden has announced new executive orders to combat climate change. From Washington, FSN's Kate Fisher reports.
The initiatives include billions of dollars of funding for communities facing the effects of extreme weather and support for the offshore wind power industry.
Climate change is literally an existential threat to our nation and to the world.
President Joe Biden said he'd been forced to take executive action after major environmental legislation stalled in Congress. It comes as some Democrats urge the administration to declare a climate emergency, which would unlock new federal resources to address the issue and allow the president to limit oil and gas drilling. Kate Fisher, Washington.
Nearly 2 months after the Uvalde school massacre that left 21 people dead, the school police chief in charge of law enforcement's botched response is about to be fired. FSN's Tony Waterman has more from Texas.
Pete Arredondo has been on paid administrative leave for the past month, a situation that does not sit well with many of the Uvalde victims' families who are still grappling to understand why police waited over an hour to take down the gunman. At a heated school board meeting on Monday night, angry parents demanded Arredondo be fired. He's been identified as the incident commander on the day of the shooting, although he says he didn't consider himself to be in charge. An investigation by Texas lawmakers found systemic failures at all levels of the police response. The school board is expected to vote in favor of his termination on Saturday.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking in more detail today at the situation in Sri Lanka and whether it's a harbinger of popular uprisings and governmental downfalls in other parts of the world. The crisis in Ukraine and pre-existing global economic uncertainties suggests to some observers that Sri Lanka may just be the beginning of a wave of change, coming particularly to countries with long track records of instability. Jim Lindsay is with the US-based Council on Foreign Relations.
The Sri Lankan economic crisis that has now become a political crisis has been building for years. It involved a tremendous amount of mismanagement. And I think as you look elsewhere around the world, the countries that are going to be hurt the most by what is happening in Ukraine are countries that already have lots of problems, maybe of their own making, maybe not. What's happening in Ukraine will make it worse, particularly with issues of whether or not we're going to be able to get food that would normally come out of Russia and Ukraine onto the world market. Countries that have a lot of debt and don't have the ability to service it are in a difficult position.
He stresses that heavily indebted countries with looming potential food insecurity are especially susceptible to exactly the kind of people power that has been seen in Sri Lanka, with much uncertainty there still ahead. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
And the main news again. President Biden says the US military think a planned trip to Taiwan by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is a bad idea. Biden's issued new executive orders to combat climate change, which he has called a clear and present danger. And the Uvalde school police chief during the mass shooting incident is likely to be fired on recommendations from the district. There's more from us on Twitter at Feature Story, and that's the latest from Feature Story News. Caroline Malone reporting.
An alarming UN report on magical realism released this week warns of increased incidences of women's tears flooding the entire world. A UN committee linked the catastrophic phenomena to matronly widows, commonly named Tita and Esmeralda, who wept for up to 90 days on end about their estranged lovers.
Just consider how detrimental it is to a nation's workforces to have thousands of its plantation overseers simply disappear one night into the midsummer fog, only to return decades later without having aged a single day. Put simply, if such phenomena are not immediately halted, the effects on the international community will be catastrophic.
The nation's limo drivers spent a magical prom night playing scratch-off tickets in the parking lot this week. According to sources, chauffeurs nationwide began their enchanting evening by cramming swank magazines into their glove compartments before dropping off their students at a school gym, working through a stunning assortment of lotto cards, and dining upon a wide range of microwave-heated taquitos from a nearby 7-Eleven.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, and you're invited to take control of the airwaves and talk about whatever is on your mind. 603-283-6160 if you'd like to do that. Again, that number is 603-283-6160. With you in the studio tonight, it's Aria.
It's Bonnie.
It's Ian.
And coming up, we are going to be talking about the big cryptocurrency news today, which is Tesla dumping almost $1 billion worth of Bitcoin into the market. I want to know how they found buyers for this, right? What exchange facilitated this massive transaction or these massive transactions? We're going to talk about that because it's important in the cryptocurrency world. It's a bad time for Tesla to dump a bunch of Bitcoin too. I don't remember when it made news that they had bought, a bunch of Bitcoin or whatever, but they had to have lost money on this endeavor at this point.
Well, there was a big drop down earlier today, but it's recovered a little bit since then. So it wasn't a huge drop or anything like that.
When there was news that Tesla was buying a bunch of Bitcoin, it was at like 50,000 or 40,000 or something.
I thought it was much higher back when we first talked about it.
So are they like losing half of their money?
Sounds like they took a big bath.
That's weird.
Sounds like they did. We're going to talk about that, but we are talking about The Anarchists now, which is the HBO series that, from what I've heard, gives a fair shake to anarchists, to
Bonnie
actual
and I have seen the
voluntarists.
first 2 episodes, and I would say it does give a fair shake to them.
I mean, there's still time for them to start doing something shady, but thus far, I don't understand why they would come out with these 2 episodes if they were going to make it a big hit piece on anarchists, because these first 2 make it seem like pretty cool to be an anarchist. I mean, it's following around some families with little kids, and like, it's not making people look crazy.
Well, but I can understand why. Like, you have to remember, we're voluntarists. I don't like the term anarchist personally, but I know you guys do. We're people that are in this community. We know, in many cases, a lot of these people. I have met almost, not all, but a good majority of the people that they've interviewed for this, and I think they're good. I think mostly they're good people. I don't have an opinion about Jeff Berwick's alleged scams he's been involved with, because I don't know what the truth is on those claims. I'm not going to send him up the river on that. He's always been honest in our dealings with him as far as Free Talk Live's dealings. That's all I can say as far as that goes.
And he also came out to defend you guys whenever you guys went to jail. The next day he was like, tagging Keene Police Department, like, why did my friends get arrested for selling cryptocurrency last night?
Yep, like I said, he's always been honorable in our dealings with him.
I think he's the only one that I've heard of that I haven't met.
Yeah, so, as far as my personal feelings for these people, I like them. But I understand the argument from the other side is that, oh my God, this show is going to get into murder. This show is going to it's getting into drug dealing.
It's not anarchists doing the murder.
Well, you'll find out about that. There's a crazy person that they're talking about. In episode 2, they introduce a guy who's like a war veteran who's, kind of a little on the crazy side. And I don't know if he ends up being the guy that hires the hitmen. I can't remember for sure.
Those are silly criticisms. That's just drama.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you got to have that sort of thing.
It is. But I guess I think what he's going to argue here is that there would be supposedly more like crispy clean kind of characters that they could have focused on.
Like
but then,
who?
then that wouldn't have been interesting, and it wouldn't have been an interesting documentary series.
Jeffrey Tucker, maybe?
Well, right. Yeah, that's a good example.
Following him around Connecticut.
So
not in Anarchapulco.
No, he was there.
I'm sure he was, yeah. I mean, he's a doer, so I'm not at all surprised to hear that.
He showed up in one of the backgrounds of some of the shots. So anyway, he's going to get into this story here. It's artofliberty.substack.com. He's looking at the personalities who are involved behind the scenes of this. Jason Blum, the CEO of Blumhouse Productions, one of the executive producers. Now remember, an executive producer is just someone who puts money behind a project.
Yes, they pay for it.
That is their goal. While in some projects they may have some influence as far as they probably hire the director or something like that. But in a case like this, the director goes and he shoots the documentary and then pitches it, right? And then they might get some more money from somebody like Blumhouse to produce a little further,
to do some editing,
do some promotions for it, get it placed on a place like HBO. So he says, cross-dressing Hollywood horror weirdo Jason Blum mischaracterized
That's
anarchy.
Not fair at all.
No, it's not.
First of all,
no, but that's kind of where this comes from. It seems to come from sort of a conservative viewpoint to some extent. Like,
he probably hates Keene.
No, he's been here. I mean, he's been very, very kind to us from what I've seen. So I don't know what it's weird. Anyway, he goes on. He says he mischaracterized anarchy as a dystopian chaos if the government goes offline for even a single day. And what he's referring to is a series known as The Purge. It's a Hollywood horror series or thriller series or whatever you want to call it.
I would call it a thriller, yeah. And it's not very good. It's a really tired, boring, cliche concept that, if there were no laws for 24 hours, then your average person would become this horrible rapist, thief, murderer type of person. And that's just fundamentally untrue. Every listener out there, with the exception of the extremely rare psychopaths, if you had the chance to take someone's life and get away with it, no prison time, never, you wouldn't do it.
There's absolutely nobody that I would kill, no one that I would kill if...
it's not the law that is stopping people from committing murder. It's their own internal sense of morality. And
people are mostly good, by and large.
And if their internal morality breaks down, the law isn't going to stop them. They're going to commit murder whether it's legal or not.
So Etienne asks an important question about this person, Jason Blum. Can we completely trust him to accurately portray anarchists and anarchy? So you got the same guy who was behind the Purge movies, apparently, is the executive producer of this series.
In that quote from Jason Blum about anarchy, was that relating?
There was no quote.
Oh, he said that he can't characterize anarchy.
He's just saying that because Blum was the executive producer of a series of movies that mischaracterizes anarchy as chaos.
Did The Purge ever call it anarchy, though?
That's what I was also wondering.
It called it a period of lawlessness, I believe.
There is actually a movie called The Purge: Anarchy.
Okay.
So one of the sequels actually did use the word in the title.
I wonder if he regrets that word choice now that he's been affiliated with an actual anarchist project that was peaceful.
He says, I've been working on an expose of Anarchapulco and Jeff Berwick for over a year, and will pick that back up to have something shortly after the upcoming 5th edition of my book, Government and the COVID, The Biggest Scams in History Exposed. Ships, and before the 6th episode of The Anarchist airs, with a complete review and background on Blumhouse Television.
Jason Blum said that?
No, this is the author here. There's no quote from Jason Blum.
Oh.
He says, who also produced, among other drivel, The Purge Anarchy, which denigrates anarchy and makes it appear that a world without government, even for a day, would see the population descend in lawless and murderous dystopia. He says, I've watched the documentary Crew, again, talking about this documentary, The Anarchist now, working on this for years and only interacted a couple of times. I try to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, so I will save the complete review for after the 6th episode. And mind you, he wrote this after the 1st episode, so he hasn't seen anything since. I don't know if he's written it. He has not written anything since then.
He doesn't seem to be particularly willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, though, and to withhold his judgment. If after the 1st episode, he writes this lengthy piece about how it's, CIA infiltration.
He says, but I'm deeply suspicious already in the fact that the apparent controlled opposition media asset Jeff Berwick appears to have been elevated as a leader in the voluntarist movement, and that organized crime Hollywood would have a documentary crew embedded with Anarchapulco for 6 years, not to mention the documentary has already been reviewed by Time, CNN, The Guardian, Salon, The Daily Beast, and more monopoly media cartel outlets right out of the gate. Now, I haven't read any of those reviews, so I don't know what the mainstream media opinion on this.
Well, they're certainly not calling it a hit piece against freedom lovers, right? The Vice would never say that. MSNBC would never say that. The New York Times. To them, they're like, this is mischaracterizing anarchists as peaceful, loving people, and that's wrong. Anarchists are bomb-throwing rioters or whatever.
Yeah, the New York Times just came out with a hit piece about anarchists like 2 days ago.
He says it gets even more suspicious. You just can't make this stuff up. Another executive producer, Jeremiah Crowell, was the executive producer of a documentary series called Pandemic: How to Prevent an Outbreak, featuring Bill Gates predicting COVID-19 and pumping vaccines, that was released on propagandist Netflix in January of 2020, a month before COVID-19 hit. Alex Jones alleges that Bill Gates funded the documentary, but I haven't seen anything conclusive on that yet. But Bill Gates and vaccines are definitely the heroes of this very prescient documentary, predictive programming propaganda piece that set the stage for the scam of COVID and demonstrated foreknowledge of the quote-unquote pandemic on the part of the propagandists.
I mean, that's certainly alarming, but I would hate to criticize a director or whatever based on every film they've ever done or every project they've ever taken part in. Some of these, they're just looking for a paycheck. I don't know.
And also, we can't skip over that he just alleged something about Jeff Berwick.
It is Free Talk Live.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com.
Are you tired of your taxes funding endless occupations around the world? Antiwar.com is run by people who understand that wars abroad become wars at home, wars on our freedoms. Antiwar.com is dedicated to bringing you the latest in news, views, interviews, and reviews from the top movers and shakers in the anti-occupation movement. Antiwar.com has it all, from thorough foreign policy analysis to interviews with whistleblowers who used to run the military-industrial complex. Anti-war, pro-free market. That's antiwar.com.
When a lunar observatory detects a radio broadcast originating from Proxima Centauri, the nations of Earth discover their first contact with an alien race may also be their last. With the Proximans facing an extinction-level disaster, Earth must choose between sending a ship on a multi-year journey or allowing nature to take its course. Saving Proxima, a hard science fiction thriller by Travis S. Taylor and Les Johnson from BaneBooks.com.
I'm a little obsessed with My Magic Mud. Several years ago, I met Jessica Armand, the founder and CEO of My Magic Mud, and I didn't even know my teeth were coffee stained. A week's worth of use convinced me, and now I use it every 3 or 4 days. It's clinically proven to whiten teeth, and I think it cleans better, too. My Magic Mud's available at most local health food stores, Sprouts, Natural Grocers, CVS, Walmart's Natural Beauty Aisle, but I can get it for you for 20% off with coupon code FTL20 at MyMagicMud.com. FTL20, MyMagicMud.com.
Hey, you are going to love the movie Victimless Crime Spree. It's hilarious, heartwarming, and carries a ton of inspiring freedom messages. Feeling down about the lack of liberty in your life? You need to put on this film with some friends and have a good laugh. It's a true story about me and my friends in New Hampshire living free, singing, dancing, and getting arrested. Of course, it's all on video, and the bad guys, the cops, judges, bailiffs, and sheriffs, they all play their part like it's out of a movie or something. You would think we scripted the whole thing, but it's real life. Go ahead and have a watch, and if it's been a while, have another look. I guarantee you'll notice things now that you didn't notice before. And the best part is that you're going to walk away feeling a renewed sense of your own power. You are the master of your destiny, and you will be free in your lifetime. Victimless Crime Spree.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
There are basically 2 types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, where you're invited to share your thoughts and opinions. We're talking about The Anarchists here, the HBO special, and whether or not it's controlled opposition to the actual peaceful, voluntarist anarchist. It's difficult to say what this guy's motives are, right? The guy whose article we're reading, we're never going to really know what his motives are, but he sounds a bit salty, in particular at Jeff Berwick, and he sounds upset that he's not getting the credit that he feels he's due. That's my take on this, because that's why he keeps mentioning, his competing festival and all the book sales he had and all of these other things. He's like, I was a big deal. And from what I'm understanding, he's upset because the documentary focused on Jeff Berwick and other anarchists rather than himself.
So is he part of Anarchaforco?
Yeah, I think they changed the name of it. He mentions that earlier in the article, which is a forked version of Anarchapulco, the anarchist event that is focused on in this documentary series called The Anarchists. You're speculating, Aria,
I am speculating
about that. I don't know. It seems like this is just somebody who has some serious disagreements with people in the liberty movement, which isn't unheard of. There's definitely personality conflicts. Maybe Jeff Berwick did him wrong, or he perceives he got done wrong in some way by the people who were putting Anarchapulco together. I don't know the story.
No, but certainly not. But worth mentioning, and I hope the guy here is listening to the show, because there's some chance he might be.
He's been on the show before.
Your article here is exactly what controlled opposition would do.
To try to sow dissent and turn people against one another.
They would attack the people at the top. They would attack the whole idea. They would smear the documentary. He's doing exactly what controlled opposition would do.
Even if I was somebody who knew nothing about anarchists and for some reason came across this guy's article, I would think that and I hadn't watched the show, I would think that the show was showing worse people than it actually is. Like, it's not showing anybody look crazy or bad or bomb throwing. It's showing a bunch of families with kids, mostly.
Well, according to Jason Henza, who's in the documentary, who's watching us on YouTube right now, it's going to get really, really ugly, which sounds about right based on what I know of the history of Anarchapulco. That said, this is what you get when you have 600 anarchists. Half of them are potheads. The other half are doing cocaine. That's just the reality. And if they're not doing any of that, they're a boring square like this guy.
So going on here, I don't know if I would call Howard a boring square, but I mean,
if he's taking issues with cross-dressing and the drug use and the drug dealing and all this other stuff, I'm sorry, man, that's a boring square.
Yeah. I mean, his name is Attila Buen Squared.
Cross-dressing drug dealers have made my life immensely entertaining, so I can't hold that against them. To me, they bring goodness to the world.
Yeah, I don't know what I suspect he has his own vices. I just don't know him well enough to say anything about that. But and maybe he's trying to pander to the conservatives for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't know why. But going on here, he's looking at the production side of things and who are the executive producers or some of them involved in this. Because the claim is that the people who are on HBO's side, the claim not by the gentleman writing this attack piece, but by the people that support this documentary. The claim is the people who were involved in making this documentary were not controlled by HBO. There wasn't some puppet master at the top telling them, "Oh, you have to have this narrative, you have to do this, you have to show this, you have to make anarchists look this way." That's the claim that I've heard, but he's saying differently. He's saying, look at these people who are involved. You've got the guy behind Blumhouse, Jason Blum, who's made anarchists look like bomb throwers and violent in his series of movies called The Purge. Can he be trusted?
That's not a fair criticism. I've seen a lot of the Purge movies. I've certainly seen the first Purge, and I don't recall anyone ever characterizing the event as anarchy. That said, there was a movie called Purge Anarchy that like 6 people watched, right? Like this was like the 3rd or 4th movie in the series, and you know how ratings are and how viewerships go down. Once you get to that point, it's
the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, it's probably. I'm going to look it up on IMDb, in fact, to find out what it's got on Rotten Tomatoes, because I imagine it's somewhere like 2 stars or 3 stars, because it's not a good movie. Not a whole lot of people watched it, and it didn't damage anarchism.
And that you make a good point. It's not like he named the first Purge Anarchy, and it's not like it's not like that was the point of the entire movie.
There's Purge Election Year, Purge Forever, Purge Anarchy. There's several of these things, and they only get worse.
They're just cheap turnouts, basically.
I mean, I don't blame the guy for having actually, I'm shocked. IMDb has a rating of 6.4 for the Purge Anarchy. That's significantly higher than I would have expected, having seen it.
So he focused on another producer, Jeremiah Crowell, saying he was making documentaries about, essentially outbreaks, pandemics, with Bill Gates being featured. This other woman, Mary Licio, is an executive producer who appears to actually specialize in making movies that reinforce the, quote, official story, unquote, of historical events where the CIA, FBI, or organized crime media was either the main suspect in government criminality or was involved in covering it up, including CIA assassinations, hoax shooting for gun control, and a government massacre of over 80 men, women, and children. There's a movie she's producing now called Enough, which is about mass shootings in the United States. A movie called The Walkout, which is about the shooting in Parkland, Florida, which he calls a hoax. I'm not sure why.
I mean, worth mentioning as well in regard to Purge Anarchy is that this guy, Jeff Bloom, was not the director or the writer, and he didn't seem to have anything to do with it other than owning the production house that did it.
10 weeks.
Yeah, well, this lady seems like the most, the only one so far that he's mentioned that I would think maybe I understand his point about her.
Another movie
Literally,
she's producing is called 10 Weeks. Quote, 5 Americans go through 10 weeks of basic training, showing their transformation from civilians into soldiers, unquote. Translation, pro-military recruitment infomercial where 5 human beings are tricked using classic textbook unethically manipulative techniques and Hollywood propaganda into adopting a completely indoctrinated worldview and pseudo-religion, statism, where they sell their souls, soul dyers, by agreeing to kill whomever they are told in foreign wars based on lies and manufactured intelligence. So, to some extent,
should have led them with that lady.
So, to some extent, when you are, a producer, you're just trying to make money, right? Yeah. So maybe she's just somebody pouring money into various different projects because she thinks she's going to get wealthy off of them. But to another extent, you do get to choose your projects, right? Like,
yeah, but she also chose anarchists.
She did. She did, but the question is why? Does she have a hand in producing this? Is it really going to get as ugly as Jason Henza, who was one of the featured anarchists?
Well, that's because the facts are ugly. That's not because of any particular smear campaign by the
But
creators.
Would they have produced this if it wasn't so ugly? Do they want to make anarchists look like an ugly, violent, dangerous, evil movement? That's ultimately the question.
I would suggest that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, let's see if they do the Free State Project next.
I would suggest that it doesn't appear to be the case that they're trying to do that because they open it up by talking about how these anarchists are peaceful people, not the violent bomb throwers.
They do. And will this be presented in a ultimately uplifting fashion? Will there be a positive message at the end of this, or will the message be, oh look, a bunch of anarchists moved to Acapulco, and turned out they all fought with each other, and then the movement disintegrated? Is that how it's going to end? Look at all these people. Is that
the reality of how
I don't know.
It ended?
I don't know. I suspect a lot of the people who moved there have moved out. But
that's my suspicion as well, based on some of the people I know. But
yeah,
even if they end with that, they're just relaying the facts of what happened. Just like Derek J's victimless crime spree ended with Derek J moving out of the state, right?
Yeah,
it wasn't a smear campaign against the Free State Project. That's just what happened. 603-283-6160. If you want to weigh in on this subject, it is Free Talk Live.
Carl Watner, longtime proponent of a voluntary society, died last December. You may have seen his articles published on his website, voluntarist.com, in his newsletter, The Voluntarist, the Mises Institute, or elsewhere over the last 40 years. His newest book, I Must Speak Out, Volume 2, The Best of the Voluntarist, is now available via Liberty Under Attack Publications. This 430-page second volume spans the years of 2000 through 2020 and includes articles by Carl Watner, Hans Hermann Hoppe, Carl Hess, Benjamin Tucker, George H. Smith, Lysander Spooner, Pete Eyre, Joyce Brand, and many others. I Must Speak Out is for the newly initiated, the veteran voluntarist, or anywhere in between. Buy the book now at libertyunderattack.com/voluntarist. For more great content on building a voluntary society and for Carl's extensive archives, check out voluntarist.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Caroline Malone. President Biden has indicated that a proposed visit to Taiwan by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, does not have the support of the US military. The president's comments come hours after Beijing warned it would take forceful measures if the visit to Taipei went ahead. Our Washington correspondent Simon Marks reports.
This trip by Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan is mooted but not yet confirmed. She was supposed to visit Taipei back in April, but then tested positive for COVID-19 and dropped the idea. Now, President Biden has told reporters that the US military thinks it's not a good idea for the speaker to make the journey. Beijing agrees, warning it will take forceful measures if Nancy Pelosi becomes the highest-ranking US government official to set foot on Taiwanese soil since 1997. President Biden did not indicate whether the Pentagon's opposition effectively derails the speaker's plans, but he did say he expects to speak to Chinese President Xi Jinping within the next 10 days, boosting speculation that the president may have now decided to alleviate some of the Trump-era tariffs that are still in place against Chinese goods.
US President Joe Biden has announced new executive orders to combat climate change. From Washington, FSN's Kate Fisher reports.
The initiatives include billions of dollars of funding for communities facing the effects of extreme weather and support for the offshore wind power industry.
Climate change is literally an existential threat to our nation and to the world.
President Joe Biden said he'd been forced to take executive action after major environmental legislation stalled in Congress. It comes as some Democrats urge the administration to declare a climate emergency, which would unlock new federal resources to address the issue and allow the president to limit oil and gas drilling. Kate Fisher, Washington.
Nearly 2 months after the Uvalde school massacre that left 21 people dead, the school police chief in charge of law enforcement's botched response is about to be fired. FSN's Tony Waterman has more from Texas.
Pete Arredondo has been on paid administrative leave for the past month, a situation that does not sit well with many of the Uvalde victims' families who are still grappling to understand why police waited over an hour to take down the gunman. At a heated school board meeting on Monday night, angry parents demanded Arredondo be fired. He's been identified as the incident commander on the day of the shooting, although he says he didn't consider himself to be in charge. An investigation by Texas lawmakers found systemic failures at all levels of the police response. The school board is expected to vote in favor of his termination on Saturday.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, and you're invited to join the show, 603-283-6160 if you would like to do that. Again, that number is 603-283-6160. With you tonight, it's Aria.
It's Bonnie.
It's Ian.
And I want to say thank you to Brant Freeman, who is tonight's amplifier. This means that Brant is a member of the AMPS program. You can find it at amps.freetalklive.com. That's amps.freetalklive.com. It stands for Advertise, Market, Promote, and Support. So if you value the show, if you want to help us get on more radio stations, get our podcast more listens, all of that great stuff, joining the AMPS program is the best way to do it. It only takes $5 per month. That gets you in. And you do get a number of cool little perks, like there's an AMP-only chat room on our Matrix server, there's an AMP-only Facebook group, and there's even an AMP-only version of the podcast. So check it out, amps.freetalklive.com. Brant, thank you so much for your contributions. We're talking here about the anarchists, and this one particular anarchist's understanding of the documentary as being a hit piece against anarchists and voluntarists and libertarians. And
to be fair, he says he's suspicious.
Yes.
Now, these are his suspicions. He says he's withholding judgment until the end, but he does have some strong opinions about what could be going on with the anarchists, which is to say that it may be designed to ultimately make the anarchist movement look bad, even though, to its credit, in the very beginning, it does point out that this is a peaceful movement. That these are not bomb-throwing anarchists, so at least the narrative from that perspective has been correct so far. And as you point out, Aria, it's not lying about anything, right? Like, it's revealing that, yes, there is drama within this movement. Yes, this family doesn't get along with this family, and they have their spat.
They had a whole episode already about cryptocurrency, and I didn't detect anything really negative.
No, they haven't gone after crypto yet. No, you're right about that.
So I'm interested to see. I think I'm going to wait until all 6 episodes are out
Just
at this
binge it.
point. Yeah, because I prefer to binge it. I don't like waiting on something that I'm invested in.
It is kind of frustrating. Like, I haven't done it in a long time.
Like Tiger King, I waited until they were all out before I watched it, and that proved to be a really good decision because I would have hated to wait from 1 week
Too
to
many
the next.
cliffhangers.
Yeah. And I suspect the same thing is true of The Anarchist. So once all 6 are out, I will binge it at that point.
So we've talked about the production side. According to this is artofliberty.substack.com, who's the critic here of this series, and he's looked at the producers. The producers he's focused on are the executive producers. They're not supposedly not the ones with the creative control over the project. They just have put some money into it.
Executive is lower than regular?
No, executive is the highest level producer. They are the people who are the money men for a project. But
So you're
they
saying
don't always have creative control, per se.
Oh, okay. The ones he focused on were executive?
Correct. Yeah, 3 of the executive producers. There's more than 3, though. There's a series of people.
Sure.
He only looked at 3 of them. So then he says, so which anarchists, and he puts that in quotes, were featured in episode 1? First, I'm not suggesting that every speaker, sponsor, attendee, or employee of the Anarchapulco or subject featured in the documentary is controlled opposition. In the same way that...
And everyone knows you're controlled opposition.
In the same way that rat poison is overwhelmingly good food, the overwhelming majority of speakers, attendees, and employees of Anarchapulco are amazing, free-thinking individuals, which is what made the conference so amazingly cool.
Run this by me again. What did he say about rat poison?
I think it's 80% cockroach food that's fine for them and 20% poison.
Okay.
You got to get them to eat it, right? He says, I'm also not suggesting that every single person who I highlight below is being chosen by the filmmakers to poorly represent the movement or tar it through association are quote in on it, unquote, as controlled opposition's shills.
Those people were just being themselves, man. I mean, again, this is what you get when you have anarchists and libertarians together.
Some are likely useful idiots whose personas were chosen and words were taken out of context, or legitimate leaders in the movement like Larkin and Amanda Rose, who participated to reach the HBO audience and are being used by the filmmakers to give a gloss of authenticity. I myself have been an attendee and was a speaker even after I began to suspect in 2018 that Anarchapulco was another organized crime controlled opposition scam. I continued to participate.
That is one hell of an accusation, dude.
And he says he's going to be writing an expose. I continue to participate to reach the audience.
How does he justify writing a piece like this without backing it up with, if he has evidence to support these claims?
He says it's coming out in the next five weeks.
But and that may very well be true, but it doesn't make it any less reckless and despicable to have this hit piece hanging out there for 5 weeks.
He says, I continue
with no evidence whatsoever.
He does say that it's just a suspicion in it every time he says stuff like that, but it's pretty bad.
Well, he didn't say, oh yeah, that's right, he does say suspect. I continue to participate to reach the audience and get hard copies of my book into the hands of important people from around the world. So now he looks at the individuals. Jeff Berwick, he accuses him of cross-dressing and shows an image of Jeff Berwick wearing lipstick as the tranny vigilante at one point. Suspected.
I wonder what he'd think of Arya.
I wish I had thought of that.
Suspected.
I've met him. I've met the author of this article.
Howard?
Yeah. Oh. He's been at the Porcupine Freedom Festival. I have no idea what he really thinks about me, but he hasn't.
He must think you're evidence of us being opposed opposition. Cause
he never seemed to be the kind of person who would really care about that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, now he's mentioned it twice. Yeah. Well, cross-dressing and then
yeah, he mentions it as the first point as well, which is strange. Suspected controlled opposition media figure connected to the Obama and Biden administrations through Jessica Kill, the producer of Anarchapulco. And we're going to get into her.
Wait,
in
Jeff Berwick is?
2019, no. Jessica Kill. So I think what he's saying here isn't really fair because he's saying, well, you knew this other girl who's connected to Obama and Biden. Okay, well, that's...
I'm sure we know plenty of people who are connected to the federal government.
Actually, Joel Valenzuela used to work for the Bush
administration,
White House.
He says if you
TJ the Spy used to work for the NSA.
Yeah. He says if you were trying to make the voluntarist anarchist movement look seedy, you couldn't have propped up a better seedy AF con man than Jeff Berwick. From defrauding voluntarist investors in the Galtz Gulch Chile scam, selling fake passports to anarchists, to promoting Ponzi schemes like BitClub and a dozen S-coins, you couldn't ask for a worse representative. And again, I want to say this about Berwick. He's never done anything dishonest with regards to Free Talk Live. All of our dealings with him, he's been honorable. I don't know about these allegations. There have always been a lot of allegations, and he just referred to some of them about Berwick. But as far as I'm concerned, I have no opinion about them because I can't know for sure whether or not.
Has anything ever been proven? Has anything been
it's
taken
not real
to court?
clear. There's two sides to every story, and who knows, Berwick himself may have been taken advantage of in those circumstances.
Referencing crap coins tends to make me think of that, right? There have been countless, crap coins that I was invested in, that I was interested in, that I was promoting out there, but
that you thought were going to work. And
it doesn't mean I was defrauding anyone or being dishonest. It was a project that I believed in that ultimately just wasn't successful. Those things happen.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure John McAfee is not seen as a fake anarchist.
So there is something that he brings up here that has been addressed in the second, or has been brought up in the second episode. It wasn't brought up in the first one, but in the second episode, BitClub makes an appearance. And when I first heard about this, I was immediately skeptical. BitClub is, or was, essentially Bitcoin mining Ponzi scheme, or at least that's what it appeared to be. That's what it's being accused of being. People have been brought up on criminal charges about this. When it first came across to Free Talk Live, we were at Anarchapulco. We were broadcasting from the event, and the Joby Weeks, who was one of the representatives of BitClub, was obviously interested in getting on to talk about it. And I don't think we did promote this thing because I was immediately skeptical of it. I know, network marketing to be immediately skeptical of that, and so I was turned off from it based on the network marketing aspect of it. But it seemed really, really, possibly scammy to me, and that was without having dug too deeply into the situation. Promising big returns. There was a whole bunch of red flags about this thing. Like, you know what? I don't want to be associated with this. I sure as hell don't want to join the thing. And then a few years later, federal government, arrests these guys and brings them up on charges, and there's interesting allegations about it. Now, it's the federal government, so they tell lies, so who knows how much of the allegations they're bringing are true. I don't even know if these guys have been convicted of anything at this point, even though it's been a few years since they were charged. But BitClub was definitely a big name at Anarchapulco. Now, that doesn't mean anything about what Jeff Berwick believes, because it could have just been Jeff Berwick's like, oh, you've got $10,000 and you want to be a sponsor? Okay, come on in. I mean, I certainly know that if Mark Edge were running the event, he would have done the same damn thing, which is why I've had to tell Mark on multiple occasions, hey man, why don't we check this thing out before we accept them as a sponsor? And I've had to turn down a number of companies he's wanted to sponsor this show. So I don't know if Jeff Berwick was as choosy about his sponsors.
Certainly sounds like it wasn't. It's Free Talk Live.
On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So, I mean, that's really the reason why I amp is because I know that if it wasn't for you guys being on as many stations as you are, I never would have found the ideas of liberty.
You can help more people hear the message of liberty by joining Free Talk Live's AMPS program on Patreon for as little as $5 a month. And you'll get access to special perks. Visit amps.freetalklive.com, amps.freetalklive.com.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm. The Free State Project has reached its goal of 20,000 liberty lovers who've pledged to move to New Hampshire and get active to achieve liberty in our lifetime. Perhaps you're trying to figure out what part of New Hampshire should be your destination. If so, consider Keene. You'll find more than 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com. Keene is famous for its historic, publicity-generating activism, as well as being the liberty media capital of the world. It's home to freekeene.com, New Hampshire's destination for liberty activism, news, and opinion. For years, we've been compiling over 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com, where you'll learn about some of what's happening here and what makes Keene a great place to live. If you love liberty, you'll probably enjoy anywhere you end up in the Shire. But do your due diligence first. Please visit move.freekeene.com for the full list of over 150 reasons to move to Keene. That's move.freekeene.com. If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. You're invited to join us on our social media server. You can find that at social.freetalklive.com, where you're not going to be censored by these big tech platforms that are, prohibiting you from expressing yourself online. We don't do that over on our social media server. That's social.freetalklive.com. It's on a Mastodon server, which is very similar to Twitter. It's called Tooting instead of tweeting, but it's got a very similar user interface. Well, depending on what app you use, because it is decentralized. No one's in control of making the one true app that people use for Mastodon. So you could use Tusky or Wellbird or any other app that you prefer.
Can we change the name of Toot like Trump did?
You'd have to edit the code of the server, so you'd have to talk to the administration
because
about that.
Earlier today, Ian said, I tooted about the blah, blah, and I was like, oh, God, it just sounds so bad.
I'm not a fan of tooting either, but I mean, it is what it is. I usually just say I tweeted it because, it's so similar to
posted
Twitter that, or posted. Posted's even better. But let's go to the phones. We have Bob on the line from West Virginia. Bob, you're on Free Talk Live.
Well, I don't have a whole lot to say, but I would like to give you a heads up. Do not be fooled because somebody tells you they are anarchists. There are anarchists that are purist Marxists that believe that they will first create the dictatorship of the proletariat. And
well, then they're not anarchists.
Once everyone becomes the true communist man, then they will realize their true identity, and the state will wither away. That's the anarchy they believe in.
Right. I'm familiar with those. They tend to avoid libertarians in New Hampshire, though, because we're a different breed of anarchists here.
I understand, but I'm saying beware of the big bad wolf who, goes in sheep's clothes.
Sure. It's good advice.
They can fool you.
I don't know if any of them have ever been able to fool us up here because, if you talk to a anarcho-communist for a little while, it shouldn't take too long to suss out what they really believe, and I don't see any reason why they would want to, try to infiltrate us to fool us.
Though, like Bob Avakian in Colorado.
I'm not familiar.
Yeah. He's got his, he's got his following, and they are, the idea is to lure people in with the idea of anarchy and
And then do what
pure
with them?
freedom or whatever, and they eventually become his followers. And
he's in Colorado, man. I don't care what he does. Let him drag all the communists to Colorado if that's what they want. I'm good with it.
Beware. Don't always believe. You can't judge a book by its cover.
Well, it seemed to me like what you were saying when
deal with. That's all.
The beginning of this call. Well, the beginning of this call, he was saying something opposite than he's saying now. He was saying that the people, these are anarchists that supposedly tricked him, they want to bring about communism first to bring about anarchy. So how would they trick anarchists if they are telling us they want to bring about communism? We would just be like, okay, go do that somewhere else.
Marxist-Leninists believe that ultimately the state will wither away.
Well, they're not going to trick anybody.
They'll have true anarchy.
They're very vague on they're very vague on that particular subject, right? Like they established this dictatorship of the proletariat, and then suddenly, magically, anarchy. In the Communist Manifesto, there's no clear.
Happens.
But we've never even come close to actually attempting communism anywhere. They just socialism. But even so,
they trick you by saying it's never truly been tried.
Well, it hasn't. It hasn't, Bob. We haven't had
socialism has been tried.
Yeah,
that's for
communism has not been tried.
There are communes. I mean, some communes, have survived over some number of years, but those are done on a voluntary basis. And if communists want to move to a commune, I think they should.
Yeah.
That they should stay there.
Yeah, and some of those are still successful.
That's all I have to really say.
All right. Thank you, Bob. I don't think we're going to be tricked by them, but I appreciate your concern, and certainly you should be skeptical of anybody that comes into a movement trying to, take people somewhere else, I guess.
I mean, we are libertarians, right? We are distrustful of anyone who comes in and says, I want to take control of the reins of power to set you free.
Well, and what happened in the case of Anarchapulco, getting to the next character here in this story at artofliberty.substack.com by Etienne de la Boétie Squared, who is a critic of Anarchapulco and a critic of The Anarchist documentary. He brings up Jessica Kill.
Okay.
Now,
is that her last name? Yeah.
It is actually her last name. And Jessica Kill...
Is it spelled
Kill?
Wow.
Killed.
I know some kills, like K-E-E-L.
No. This woman killed this event. She was brought in to supposedly like somebody who has event managing experience. She'd been involved in other conventions, right? So she knows how to run conventions and things like that. And the experience that Free Talk Live had at Anarchapulco changed when this woman took over the event, and it was for the worst. And I wish I could remember all the details on how things kind of went bad, but we weren't able to successfully negotiate our agreement with Anarchapulco, which had been, a nice agreement that we'd had previously where, hey, we'll come down and we'll broadcast. You don't have to pay us. Just, give us a hotel room and, we'll broadcast the whole week, basically, right? Yeah. Pay for our tickets to come down, pay for the hotel room, and we'll do what normally we would charge an event $1,000 a day. For $0 per day, right? Just for the cost of the hotel room and the tickets. And we could not negotiate that same deal with her. And I forget what it was that her problem was, or what
Seems
she was.
So simple.
But she seemed to be purposefully throwing a wrench into our ability to broadcast from this event that we'd broadcast from for so many years.
And then the event died. Weird.
And well, no, I don't think it's dead. I think it's still going, actually. Okay. But she.
Well, you said really, she killed it.
She did. I mean, she made it a much worse event. She ran out of some of the longtime supporters of the event. It wasn't just us that had a bad experience with her. And I think eventually Jeff Berwick did get rid of her. But she did run the event for 2 years, and she kind of kept things going in 2019, but then in the 2021, everything went downhill. That was the one we couldn't negotiate with her to come back.
Yeah, there was also an issue with a penthouse or something like that, if I recall correctly.
2020. So there were a bunch of problems with this person. And what I've learned from this article is that she apparently was connected with Obama and Biden. There's actual photos of Jessica Kill, like buddy with Michelle Obama in a photograph at some event. There's another one with her and Biden, another one with her and Obama. So it's kind of
she's an event manager. I don't particularly find that damning. I mean, if I wanted to hire an event manager, I would care that they were good at bringing people to my event and running an event. I wouldn't care, oh, well, you're affiliated with the Democrats.
Well, it does suggest that she may have other allegiances, which may mean she was purposely trying to sink the event in some ways. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting because we definitely did have a bad experience with that particular character. But she was really the only bad experience we've ever had with Anarchapulco. Everybody else we encountered there was really cool, and it was a really fun event. And I would go again to the event if we had the opportunity to. And I don't take issue with the fact that somebody's got a problem with drinking. I mean, Jeff Berwick admits that he's got a problem with alcohol.
Hasn't he gotten better?
I don't know where he's at with it these days. I think that a lot of people fell off the wagon and then they get better, and they have a whole history with this stuff.
Well, let's go to the phones. We also have Sarah on the line from New Mexico. Sarah, people have been looking forward to your call all night. I'm not one of them, but other people have been. What's on your mind tonight? Are you still there?
Oh, she's gone.
I don't think I hit the button. No. Yep. Sarah, you're gone. I keep hitting the wrong button. Okay, I'm not used to using this particular phone.
You're also ill.
I am also ill.
Medicated.
Sarah, you're on Free Talk Live.
Hey, are you telling me I have a fan club? I mean,
that's not the word I would use, but sure.
I would. She has a lot of fans on YouTube.
Which is a troll chat.
What are you so excited about? I mean, like, that they found 6,000 needles this year here in Albuquerque.
Whoa,
you're excited about it?
That's a lot of needles.
What a shining promotion for Albuquerque, New Mexico. All of Sarah's calls.
Come on down to Albuquerque. You'll find your own needle.
6,000 needles.
Well, I mean, those are the used needles that somebody used and they tossed out laying around.
Yeah, it's an average of 16.4 needles per day.
It would be ideal to have, needle disposing stations in, next to trash cans or something like that.
They probably have those.
But people don't use trash cans.
Are there that many diabetics in New Mexico, Sarah?
No, there's that many drug addicts.
But there are laws against drugs.
How do you know they're drug addicts and not diabetics?
Well, I really don't know, but I think. Do you think it'll help if they put the waste disposal in the parks for them to dispose? I mean, how many needles do you think they would get put there? If they're drug addicts, they don't want to live anymore, and they're almost hoping that they OD while I'm shooting drugs. Do you think they'll just toss it in the sand?
They'll probably just fall asleep with it right next to them and then wake up later and walk away.
Yeah, I don't know how a heroin addict would deal with those things, Sarah. I don't know any heroin addicts, at least not well enough to find out how they would. I mean, there's certainly heroin addicts here in Keene, but I don't go, hey, man, how would you handle it if there were needle disposal stations at the trash can? Would you bother to throw your needle away?
Hey, check out The Anarchists and make up your own mind.
Absolutely. You can find that on HBO Max. We're out of time for tonight, but you can chat with us online in the meantime at social.freetalklive.com. Again, that's social.freetalklive. Let us know whether or not you've enjoyed The Anarchists. It's Free Talk Live.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless,